variance request. Given the number of lots involved, the fact that all the lots are over an acre, and that there's no new public improvement, so this is really just a redivision of property rather than a more of a standard subdivision where they're actually creating new public improvements. So we will need to take action on the variance request first before we take action on the plat itself.
Is the applicant, someone representing the applicant?
Yes, Benjamin Mormon, 10308 Hardin Valley Road, and I'm here to respond to any questions you may have.
Okay. Does anybody on the planning commission have any questions of either Mark or the applicant?
I do, Commissioner Green. I'm looking at the plat here with all the notes and stuff, and I was a little confused. In the first line, it says, the property stands in the name of Scott Mylock and is of record as instrument, et cetera, further represented as map property of William Coker. So I got two names for the same property. I was a little confused of what's going on with that.
The property has been mapped previously under Mr. Coker's name. He was a prior owner.
Okay, and that's what it was mapped under.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the new owner, is that correct?
No, I am the surveyor of record
Okay.
representing the current owner,
Who is?
Scott Mylock.
Okay.
Benny, we're taking 2 lots and creating 3 lots. Am I interpreting that correctly?
No, oh, well, we're taking two
lots
parcels.
of record.
We're taking 2 parcels. Actually, the property that lies west of the divisional line out in the water, that little small area there, that was lost in the records, and they actually were showing a false owner there, and we cleaned that up and got the property assessor's office on track with that. It is part of the parent tract.
Yeah, a lot of those old deeds actually went out to the center of the channel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's just how they did it back
Well,
then.
this deed even expanded beyond there. There was the original owner owned all the property in the vicinity, several, probably in the neighborhood of 60 to 70 acres, and that was a remnant parcel that was laying there that got titled as, on the tax records, didn't get titled, but showed up on the tax records to someone else. But we've resolved that issue.
Hopefully the trustee's office didn't have a bunch of back taxes on it that had gotten
No.
lost in the shuffle. So, no, I think this makes sense. This is a good example of reason why that there are appropriate times for variances, which this is I think what Mark said is a very simple re-subdivision of a parcel, and I guess we need to do the individual variances separately. Isn't that right, Mark?
Yeah, we need to take action on the variance first, and then we'll review the
So the
plat.
first one's the variance for the 10% open space requirement. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I'm
So moved.
sorry, what's the second one?
That's the only
one.
variance.
That's the only variance on this one. I guess we're not worried about pedestrian facilities. We kind of got
Reason they
that
don't-
covered with the new construction.
Right, yeah. Concord Road
Yep.
Improvement will have a walking trail on that side of Concord Road. That'll be part of that project, so it's not necessary to request a variance for that, from that
Okay.
requirement.
3 reasons for the single variance.
I'd say due to the simple nature of the subdivision.
Yeah, the
is-
number
is
of
what I would
lots,
use as part of that.
size of the lots.
Yeah.
It's really not a subdivision that's creating new public improvements. It's really a minor re-subdivision, which the subdivision regulations talk about that as being a candidate or a reason for granting a variance from the open space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing on this plat is on Concord Road, the access, eventually it's going to be one access point for lots 1 and 2, the 2 northern most lots. They'll come out at that access easement, which lines up with that subdivision on the other side of Concord Road. So that'll all be kind of cleaned up. That driveway that's shown there as existing will be going away before we issue any certificate of occupancy on that lot.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Approved for the variance of the 10% open space due to the size of the small, relatively small subdivision.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll move on to the next part,
In
Mark.
terms of the plat itself, there's 3 remaining comments, all of which are should be very easy to address. Clarifying the side setback requirements in the plat note, signing and sealing the revised final plat, and then obtaining the required signatures. With those subject tos, the staff recommends approval.
Are there
of the
any
plat.
issues with those?
None at all, thank you.
Move to approve based on the three subject twos. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for being here tonight.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, appreciate you about.
Thanks, Benny.
Item number 5, discussion and public hearing on a preliminary plat for the Keeney property subdivision, parcel 142.036, 142.0602, 142.0603, 142.0604, tax map 142, 12422 Union Road, 25.74 acres, 6 lots, zoned R-1, urban engineering applicant.
R-2.
It's currently R2, yeah.
2.
R2.
And the next item on this agenda will be related to this, too.
Number 9.
This is an item that was actually postponed last month. What it involves is a mostly estate-sized lot subdivision off of Union Road, the east side of Union Road. The applicant is proposing to plat 6 lots, and they'll be reconstructing an existing driveway that's on the property. Per the town zoning ordinance, we can't issue building permits for lots that don't front on a public street. So he's having to convert the driveway, which was a platted access easement, to a public street to address that requirement. And as part of that, they'll be extending a 6-inch water line along a portion of Union Road and into the property to serve the lots that are shown there, and to provide for a fire hydrant that's required per the fire code. So as far as a subdivision itself, it's a pretty minimal subdivision. It's similar to a subdivision off Dixon Road that we looked at 2 or 3 years ago called Sassafras Meadows. It's kind of a rural estate sized lots. Most of them are 4 to 5 acres. There's one smaller lot that basically includes an existing house, but the rest of the lots are all relatively large. So they are requesting a number of variances similar to what Sassafras Meadows did when you all reviewed their plat a few years ago. There's actually 6 different variances, and if you want me to, I can just go through those individually, and you all discuss and take action on them individually and talk through those. The first one is a variance from the right-of-way requirement. Normally, a local street, which is what this would be, is required to have a 50-foot right-of-way. They're proposing a 30-foot right-of-way. And basically, the justification for that is that the utilities out there are pretty much all existing except for the water line. The overhead utility, electric is out there. Sanitary sewer can be extended from existing sanitary sewer that's in the area. So one of the reasons why we have a 50-foot right-of-way is to provide for the street, which they're going to be requesting a variance in the width of the street on the subsequent item. And then to have enough space outside of the street to provide for the utilities if they're not under the street, and to do maintenance, sidewalks if needed, and those kinds of things. So basically, with a 30-foot right-of-way, their request on the next item is to have a 20-foot wide street, similar to what we did with Sassafras Meadows. That would give them roughly 5 feet on each side of the street. So the question really, in looking at this from the staff's perspective, is whether that's enough physical space for any future utilities that might go in the subdivision, like gas, for example, or potentially even a sidewalk if that became something that made sense and was desired, in the future. whether that's enough physical space to provide for those and also to provide for Public Works, the space to maintain the street and whatever other things that we may be maintaining in relation to that space. Frankly, the staff would prefer a 40-foot right-of-way. I don't have a problem with reducing it to 40. I do think if you all are comfortable with going to 30 feet, that our recommendation would be to require a wider easement along each side of the right-of-way. Normally, you have a 10-foot easement just outside of the right-of-way.
On either side?
Yeah, and so what we would recommend, if you wanted to go to 30 feet, is to have a 15-foot easement on each side. So that gives us some physical space, to work on whatever we might need to work on and not be as constrained as we would be within, gives us 5 extra feet on each side.
Mark, real quickly, that part, the easement would be part of the
It's
plat
private
approval,
property.
but would
right.
be part of the plat approval?
Yes.
Okay. Just for
It'll
clarity.
need to be a note here, and it'll have to be picked up, obviously, on the final plat.
Okay.
So the benefit for that is, since it's not a property line, it doesn't affect their setbacks. So, and it still gives us legal rights within those physical spaces to do certain things. So I think that would be a compromise if you all are interested in reducing the width to that degree. So that's all I have on that item. So if you all have any discussion on that particular variance, I'll be happy to try to answer
Hear from the applicant.
any questions.
I'd like to hear from the applicant on this right-of-way width issue. Ray, I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, I mean,
Can you tell
the
us who you are? and
Ray Keeney, 218 Baltazar. The property is rural in nature, and when you come in there, there's some large trees and stuff that are coming in that would be, in that right of way. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to giving you 15 foot on each side.
As an easement?
The easement.
Yeah. But, to make a wide road through there, I think it totally takes away from the rural nature of the property because they're such large acre tracts.
I think I think generally we're comfortable with the 20 feet of asphalt. Because I think that's what we did for Tucker Montgomery a couple of years ago on Dixon Road.
Yep.
Well,
it's
and
a-
we
well, I guess
we
we'll-
don't have to run any utilities back there.
So basically, you're doing a water line back there, and that's it. Everybody's going to be on septic, or majority.
Well, I mean, there's 2 large water lines that run along each backside of each property. And,
Okay.
and First Utility is willing to put in taps along
Oh,
those lines.
okay.
So there's no
really-
utilities either going back
So you've got
there.
water lines back there against Fox Den, and you got a water line on Union Road.
Well, there's sewer lines that go
Oh,
back.
sewer, okay.
So, yeah, sewer goes on both sides of the property, and they
Okay.
run
Well, your lots
through
are big enough if they want to go septic.
Yeah, and they could go
septic.
septic too.
Sure.
So I mean, whichever
Right.
which cost-effective way to go.
Right.
But as far as the electric is all the way to the back and it's overhead. So
Well, let's talk about the right-of-way. The reason being is I'm not opposed to a 30-foot right-of-way, but with a 30-foot right-of-way, we are going to set a precedent for future similar type developments, and we've already established that we were comfortable with a 40-foot right-of-way under similar conditions. Well, I guess what I'm asking you, Ray, is sell us on this 30-foot right-of-way and why
Well, I mean,
it won't be a problem in the future.
well, I mean, it's a the easement has been there. It was a platted easement that was platted back in the 50s, and I'm different than Sassafras Meadows because I mean they had to run all new utilities back there. I mean they had to take. I mean I don't know if they have sewer back there, but they had to run
Definitely they have
electric,
gas and water and
gas
electric.
and all that stuff back there.
You guys
And-
also have an issue with an existing house. If we widen the right-of-way, there's a problem.
Is that the old farmhouse? The old farmhouse in the back?
Well, no, it's the house there at the front
Well,
Okay.
where the garage is. Yeah, there's 2.
So you're saying we're going to conflict with a setback with that one?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So with an easement, you don't have that setback.
Right.
Correct.
I mean, I think an
Complication.
easement addresses our concerns, but we are establishing, hey, okay, under certain circumstances, we're okay with a 30-foot right-of-way.
We are.
And I just want to make sure there's not a slippery slope that we haven't missed. And I can't envision one. I think this is as good a candidate as any to have a variance for the right-of-way width.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted to hear from, I mean, it's a real simple subdivision, just a couple of, large estate lots.
Yeah.
It does make sense that that's there, and I can't think of any other reasons that the easement doesn't address our concerns in the future about getting in there. And, obviously, some of those big trees that may be in the right-of-way or in that easement, at some point, it's possible, that some of your residents could lose those trees, of which they perceive to be in their front yard and may physically be in their front yard, but they may be in that easement. So there's a little risk there, more on your part and the homeowner's part, that some of those trees could be jeopardized in the future. With some sort of, have y'all thought about putting gas in there? I mean, have you talked to KUB about gas?
It's really up to the. We've toyed it around and we're.
But you
gonna
feel like
see.
you got room to be able to get it. I mean, a lot of times the gas lines, that I've seen them actually just kind of vibrate and trench them in. But yours are a little. You do have some rock in there, so rock makes things a little bit more challenging trying to get a bunch of utilities in.
Yeah, I'm going to have to run that 6-inch water main down the one side of the driveway anyway.
Okay. You think you would have room for a gas line on the other side?
I could
Okay.
get.
I'm not saying you have to have gas. A lot of people don't even have natural gas. But it'd be nice, some of you. I suspect you're going to have some pretty big estate homes in there, and they're probably going to want gas ranges and gas grills.
I would want gas before I'd want propane.
Yeah, me too. I don't see any issue with the 30-foot under these, with the stipulation that we get the additional easement, unless staff sees something else that we're missing with this 30-foot right-of-way. Again, we are going to set a precedent tonight, but again, I don't see a problem with it.
Well, it is a little different in that the utilities are mostly already in there to service the lots, and that is something that is different from even from Sassafras Meadows. And honestly, Sassafras Meadows didn't request a variance in the right-of-way width, so we probably would have granted
There's a
one.
50-foot right-of-way? Okay. I thought we did 4, okay.
So it is a little different there. The lot sizes, the number of lots involved, I think is also relevant. The rural kind of nature and character of what they're trying to do there, trying to retain that existing driveway to the greatest extent possible.
And the only reason why we're splitting in the 3 lots on the one side is we're keeping the old farmhouse that's been there since the 1880s, and we're just gonna. I mean, it's pretty much redone. We just don't want to tear it down or anything. And with the building permits, you can only have one residence on each lot, so that's why we broke that off.
So you suspect your homeowner on lot 4R is, probably for some period of time, you've got the same owner on both of those
Yes,
lots.
correct.
Lot
Correct.
there He's talking about. It's hard to.
It's kind of a shame that couldn't be called a guest house or something, but that's for
Well,
discussion.
yeah,
Discussion
and
for
the
another
bill-
time.
Yeah, it can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the variance for a 30-foot right-of-way with 15 feet of easement. Are we going to call it a utility easement on either side? I mean, it's not really
it would be,
an access easement. It's
It'd be drainage utility, because keep in mind, the next item on this variance is an open ditch drainage, so that's another thing I want to make sure Public Works has enough physical space to work, because open ditch drainages can be a little tricky,
Yeah.
because it's kind of a free flow. So it would need to be a drainage utility, pedestrian facility easement, really. In the event that, and I don't envision this, but there were ever a desire to have a pedestrian facility in the development. I can't imagine why there would be.
not with this few lots. I really
Yeah.
just, and quite frankly, it's such a rural road. You're just going to walk down the middle of the road.
Pedestrian facility is their road.
Right.
Well, and there's nothing to tie into in Fox.
Yeah, there's
really.
nothing to tie into.
So,
on your-
construction,
neighbors.
utility, drainage easement would
Okay.
be fine.
Well, that's my motion. So
Second.
Everybody clear about what that is? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The second variance is related to this. I mentioned it earlier. It's a reduction in the street width and the omission of curb and gutter, both of which are normally required. Curb and gutter is normally required for local streets, and normally a local street needs to be 26 feet wide. So they're requesting to go to 20 feet in width. There is a little pinch point near a spring house that they're kind of narrowing it down to about 18 feet through that section. so that they can preserve that spring house. It's about, it's kind of right in this area here.
That's your traffic calming, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
That's
kind
what
of
we
a
called it, a traffic calming.
Makeshift traffic calming effort. And then there, as I mentioned earlier, they're requesting in lieu of curb and gutter, just to have an open drainage ditch section, kind of a rural cross-section. We just don't get a lot of these. We don't really have a rural cross-section. We talked about that when Sassafras Meadows came through, and I don't really know that we need to develop one because it's pretty uncommon, and it probably is going to be infrequent. But that's the request, and their rationale is on the basis of the number of lots involved, the fact that having the less pavement width would help retain the rural character of the subdivision and preserve the existing spring house and some specimen trees that might otherwise be adversely affected if the street were wider. So the staff does support that variance for those reasons.
Is
This
that-
type, I was going to say, this type of development's kind of exciting because we don't get, we want multiple choices in housing. And this farm could have been 50 lots
Yep.
pretty easily.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of nice to see some less intense uses of property that, that, we don't always get. And it gives folks different choices, instead of, if you don't want a little
Do another
lot,
road
here's an opportunity for a big lot. So it's kind of, and to me, that's a big rationale for some of these variances, besides the point that we've done this before over on Dixon Road. But I guess that's kind of my plug, that if anybody else has kind of ideas for this, there is a market for these large lots, and they're expensive lots, and I'd like to see more developers, instead of just trying to squeeze as many houses on the farm as they possibly can. I mean, there are alternatives where, and the performance still works because they're valuable because there's not a lot of them. So I applaud you, Ray. I'm glad you're doing this. It could have been a lot different.
Thank you. Well, and the way the property lays, I mean, it's set up for larger tracks. I mean, there's a lot of space on the other side of the creek, on both sides of the creeks. It's really not usable, but if you want a larger lot, it gives you a nice buffer between the neighborhoods around it. So, yeah.
Who is responsible for maintaining this natural drainage system?
Well, that's something we need to be really clear about on the final plat, I think, and maybe even on the preliminary plat. But normally it would be, the Public Works that would
Because it's
be
in our-
maintaining.
If it's
Yeah.
in the right of way, normally
It's in
the
our right of way,
yeah,
so
the town
if
will-
it's a natural drainage,
This-
are we?
You
But
know,
the
this
way,
here
but the way
is-
the road is down through there, and the way it lays, it's through it. The property sheds, to those creeks on both sides, so it's got a natural drainage
Yeah.
all the way down through there. You don't have any ponding water or anything because it's built in the high part of the property, so it just naturally drains on
And
either
the
side of the
opposite way.
property.
My only concern is, over the years, erosion, and then what does that look like? Certainly, you guys don't want to have to deal with that. So, and it's certainly, if it's in our right of way, it's our responsibility.
And we've had that come up
So-
on Llama Lane a little bit with some finger erosion, but that one is different topography, like Ray was talking about. There's two drainages on the north and south side of the driveway, and so it's a little different situation there. Probably a lot more favorable and less likely to erode in
Okay.
case of this.
All right.
Do you have any crossovers envisioned for this long driveway?
Crossovers as far as.
Pipe crossovers from one side to the other?
There is one pipe that goes under, I think it's, the second lot on the left, and there's a pipe that drains and naturally drains down into the creek on the other side.
There's currently one there?
Yes.
What's it made out of?
It's made out of, metal, but we're gonna put concrete
Okay,
in there.
that's what I wanted to hear.
Yes. I think I thought Chris noted that on the plat.
Yeah,
but-
we require concrete. It has
Okay.
to be concrete.
Yes. Yep. I didn't see it.
With that, if no one has any other questions, I'm going to move to approve the rural cross-section of the street for 18 to 20 feet with an open ditch drainage system due to the small subdivision of this property. Is that enough?
Yeah, I mean, the number of lots.
And I would say estate lots.
State lots?
Yeah. I
And
mean,
they are restricting it so that
Small number of lots?
they
Some
won't be
preservation of
able
the
to
characteristics.
further subdivide them.
No further subdivision?
I'll second Louise's motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The third variance is the omission of pedestrian facilities. That's normally a requirement when you subdivide. And the staff does recommend approval of this. There would be a pedestrian facility required along Union Road frontage.
Easement?
Well,
Well,
I'm talking
okay.
about what normally would be required.
Okay.
And then potentially a sidewalk or something on one side of the street normally. So they're requesting a variance to not provide either. There aren't any pedestrian facilities along any part of that section of Union Road currently. It's certainly an area that hopefully someday will have a system along Union Road. So what the staff would recommend in the case of this variance is similar to what we did with that property off Boring Road a few months ago, is to have a wider easement along Union Road, a 20-foot wide easement for future pedestrian facility, and that gives us some legal rights and space, physical space, to, construct a section across this frontage should that become, desirable at some point in the future. The town would be doing it, but we would at least have the easement in place as part of this plat. That's a local collector street, so the right-of-way that they would be dedicating with this is only 25 feet from the center line. So having the extra 20 feet beyond that would give us more, physical room to not only have a trail, and it may end up being 10-foot wide trails at some point in the future instead of 8, and then to have that 6-foot grass strip minimum that we try to have along collector streets. And then as far as the street internal to the subdivision, we don't have a problem granting the variance to not have a sidewalk in there, because like Noah said earlier, you could walk on the street in there and there's not a lot of lots and a lot of traffic that would be on this street. So for those reasons, we would support the variance to not require pedestrian facilities or provide them at this time, with the understanding that we would recommend the 20-foot pedestrian facility easement along Union Road frontage.
Ray, do you have an issue with that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Mark, can you help me out here?
Yes, sir.
If there were road improvements along Union Road at some
Uh-huh.
point, 10 years from now,
Yeah.
would that eat up some of the 20 feet?
No, that's an addition.
Or does it move over? Does it keep
It'd
moving?
be an
Well-
easement. I mean, our road improvements would need to be inside that right-of-way. You said there's a 50-foot right-of-way
You'd
there?
what they would be dedicating, I don't know if they have it they probably don't have it with the current.
There's already a 30-foot.
Is there already 30
Yes,
from
yeah,
center
Chris,
line?
yeah,
Well,
Chris just said there's already a 30.
Is it 30 feet from the center line? So we think that's a 60-foot right-of-way out there?
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's good.
Okay.
I didn't catch that on the
What-
plate.
Sorry, Chris Sharp, 11852 Kingston Pike. I think it calls for 25, but there's already 30, I
Okay.
believe, if I remember correctly, 30 feet out of the center dedicated
So
for
it's already kind of
right-of-way.
designed for a 60-foot right-of-way. What's the classification of Union on that?
That's a local collector on that section of Union. Union
That still
West.
is a local collector still a 50-foot right-of-way?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're okay, right. I'm kind of going along, I just want to make sure we do have the room there. I mean, normally this is where we pick up right-of-way is on re-subdivisions.
Right, right.
So, we're not having to go back in and buy right-of-way for improvements. I mean, it's naive to think that Union Road is not going to get improved
Yeah.
at some point, even though it probably ranks, I'm not sure what the mayor and aldermen have put it on their ranking, but I suspect there's a lot of other priority roads before Union Road gets widened. But I could see Union Road, getting, a little wider lanes plus some pedestrian facilities in 10 or 15 years.
Well,
Yeah.
if you think about it, it's 11-foot lane on that side, plus 2.5 for gutter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 13.5 plus 6 foot plus 8 foot. So that's 27.5.
Well, I'm pretty. If we're 30 feet from the center of the existing pavement, that basically, in my mind, tells me that, they've already kind of dedicated, designed for a 60-foot right-of-way, which should be sufficient, hopefully, for 100 years.
I'm fairly certain it's 30 on the map.
Okay.
On the map we have.
Well, you've got it marked center line on here, you've got 30 and a half, so,
So, yeah.
so generally speaking, we try to get the center of the asphalt and the center of the right-of-way to match. So, but it sounds like, obviously we'll have other challenges with other right-of-way acquisitions on Union Road, but it sounds like you guys have already, you've already kind of, somebody's given the pound of flesh at some point in the past to get us to a 60-foot right-of-way there, and that's kind of where we were going, just to make sure that there's enough room in there for future improvements. And the easement gives us a little bit more wiggle room.
Yeah, because if you did road construction, we'd have to get, that probably even with that kind of easement, temporary easements, slope easements, potentially
Construction easements.
So that's very likely. But this having that right of way plus the 20 feet, I think is a lot of
It's sufficient.
physical space that, we should be able to utilize pretty
Plus the
well.
way the road lays, it's probably, I mean, not that we don't want a sidewalk on that side of the road. It lays better on the other side because there's such a
Right.
sharp, steep grade going back to that church. So I would think that the sidewalk would go on the other side because it's a lot leveler.
I'm going to make a motion to permit a variance from the requirement of a pedestrian facility along Union Road and in the subdivision.
Second.
But including the pedestrian facility easement in the plat for the reason that it was the small subdivision of the property,
Simple subdivision.
Okay. All right,
or minor subdivision,
minor,
I
there you
should
go.
say.
I got it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The next one's open space requirement to 10% open space. Staff recommends approval of that because the way this is laid out, it's kind of an open space by design. So it's, you got generally large lots that have a lot of private open space, and there's a couple of drainages in the development that will be, part of those will be platted as water quality easements. So we feel that the intent of the open space requirement is more than satisfied with this subdivision. So we would recommend approval of that variance.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Next one's cul-de-sac length. Normally, the longest a cul-de-sac can be is 500 feet, and this one is going to be 935 feet roughly.
That's not even traditional cul-de-sac.
But it would only serve 6 lots, and realistically, given the drainages that are there and the fact that pretty much everything around it is already either developed house lots or part of a larger developed piece of property, there really aren't any reasonable or ways to extend a street into anywhere. So that really a cul-de-sac in this case is the only option. So we do support the variance based on the number of lots, the character of the subdivision, and the fact that you have the physical limitations of extending something other than a subdivision in the development.
Mark, Dan, the fireman has already given his stamp of approval on that.
Yeah, the turnaround design there was something that we've met with Ray a few times on this matter, and I
That's
think
really
he's
the catalyst for
comfortable.
that cul-de-sac length issue is for big fire
Yeah.
apparatus. And so if Dan's happy, then we should be happy.
Yeah, he's satisfied with that.
No, I'm going to let you make the motion.
Okay. A motion to approve the variance to the length of the cul-de-sac from, approximately from 500 feet to 935 feet, due to the simple nature of the subdivision. Do we need any other hardship we need to put in there?
Abutting properties include house lots of less than 1 acre.
Yep.
Or part of the existing developed property.
What Louis said.
Second on that.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
And finally, the last variance before we act on the plat itself is the requirement for vehicular connection to abutting properties. And that's similar to the previous item, really. Given the fact that you got these pretty significant drainage ways and basically everything's built out around it and the number of lots that are involved, having a vehicular connection anywhere is really not doable in this case, so the staff recommends approval of that variance as well.
I'm going to move for approval of the variance from vehicular connection due to the subdivision being less than 30 lots.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And in terms of the plat itself, there were 9 remaining comments. From the staff's perspective, I don't think any of these would seem to be significant. They should be easy to address. So we do recommend approval of the plat, subject to addressing the 9 subject twos that were in the staff's recommendations.
Okay with the
Yes.
9?
Chris, y'all are good
Yes.
with those subject twos? Okay.
I move for approval based on the 9 subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Done.
Actually, you can stay up there for the
Yeah.
Well,
rezoning if you want. We're gonna do
Yeah,
your,
yeah, we got the
We're gonna do your
rezoning
rezoning
next,
next.
too.
Okay, we're going to move on to item which is number 9 on our sheet, which is discussion and public hearing on a zoning map amendment for lots 1 through 3 as shown on the preliminary plat for a portion of the Keeney property subdivision, 12422 Union Road, 15.5 acres, to change the zoning from R-1 general single-family residential.
R2.
I'm sorry, R2, general single-family residential to R-1 rural residential, urban engineering applicant.
Yeah, this request is related to the 3 northern lots that were part of the subdivision that we looked at in the previous item. The whole property is currently zoned R2, and in R2 is kind of a traditional single-family developed subdivision zoning district, and it really is not intended to, it doesn't have really large lots, and it's not really intended to have farm animals. So the individuals that are interested in the northern lots have an interest in some point in the future of having farm animals, and since those will be well over an acre, it would be a permitted use in R1, but not in R2. In R2, you have to have at least 5 acres, and the only agricultural uses you can have in R2 is just crops. You can't have farm animals. So that's why those 3 lots are being requested to go to R1. The southern 2 lots or 3 lots on the south were intended to remain as R2. There's R1 and R2 in the general area of this subdivision. Most of it, frankly, is surrounded by R2. But the R1, from a staff's perspective, is actually, really, frankly, what the whole development should be zoned. It's a rural estate subdivision that really is more compatible with R1 as opposed to R2. But their request is only to rezone the 3 northern tracts, and we do support that rezoning request because we do, again, feel that district is compatible with their subdivision and what their intended use of those properties are in the future will be. So we recommend approval of Resolution PC-21-09, which would recommend approval of Ordinance 20-14. It would rezone the 3 lots that are shown there on the screen from R2 to R1.
The applicant have any questions or comments?
No.
I'm going to move for approval of Resolution PC-21-09.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for that,
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6. Discussion and public hearing on a final plat for preserve at Turkey Creek parcels 02103 and 02101, tax map 153, 13 lots, zoned R-2, 10.3 acre survey LLC applicant.
On this subdivision, one thing just to give you an overview, when we present final plats to the Planning Commission, there are certain improvements that we have an expectation for that need to be addressed from a staff's perspective. And one of the things that out in the field in this subdivision, this is a subdivision that is the former Goins farm, if you all remember that. It's just to the south of a portion of Inverness subdivision before you get to Anchor Park on the north side of Turkey Creek Road. So one of the field-related concerns, and frankly a reason why the staff is recommending postponement on this item for this meeting, is that the expectation for stabilization, that is grass coming in, is not out there. These pictures were taken yesterday. It's a little bit hard to see. I don't know if y'all been out to the location. I know they're trying. It's a challenge to get grass to grow in July.
Yep.
We all know that. But from a staff's perspective, we have to try to be consistent, because what happens sometimes is if the Planning Commission approves a plat with even subject tos, that, you know, with the staff, the town engineer gets pressured to sign the plat, and, you know, really, it's kind of, in this case, a little bit premature in the field from the staff's perspective, at least, for the plat to be voted on at this time. I think between now and the meeting in August, hopefully this condition will be satisfied and there won't be anything that's lingering. But we just have to try to be, you know, consistent. We postponed, I know, a couple of subdivisions a couple of times because of a lack of stabilization. We're not really trying to hold them up. I know they've been trying to get this finished in kind of the last few weeks, really, with the road and everything. It's not our intent to hold anybody up. It is our intent to try to apply certain standards that we've always tried to hold people to when final plats are being presented to the Planning Commission. So it's just a matter from our perspective of consistency and what our understanding would be of the expectations in the field for these kind of developments.
July is a tough month to grow grass. Just now, we've had more rain than we normally do, but it's hard to get it germinated and up and stabilized.
Right.
And we empathize with you.
Russ Rackley Engineering, representing the developer and the applicant. What you're looking at there is not dirt, it's hydromulch. We hydroseeded the whole site. The cut and fill slopes are hydroseeded and are grown in. And I just showed you a picture, and I can email it to all y'all from an hour ago. If you walk up and look at the mulch closely, there's green sprouting up everywhere. Quite frankly, making us wait 30 days for literally to watch grass grow is punitive. I think in the past you postponed it because of a lack of effort of people actually putting seed and straw and fertilizer down, much less hydroseeding the site. As we've done on past plats, we're more than happy to post an irrevocable letter of credit to guarantee grass is going to grow. And
We probably already have an erosion control letter of credit from you.
you certainly do, which covers stabilization, but in the past, seemingly, for whatever reason, you wanted another one, and we're okay with that. The bottom line is there's 10 lots, you're waiting for grass to grow, and as soon as we record the plat, we're asking for 5 building permits, so half the site is going to get stripped and wrapped in silt fence, and houses are going to start. So I really don't know what we gain by waiting 30 days. Again, the slopes are stable. We've had 0 issues with any kind of erosion on this site throughout the construction process. We are 100% complete, save for the 1.5-inch surface, which y'all generally accept a letter of credit for, and you can certainly give us a amount. However, it's going down tomorrow. And then sidewalks, which we always bond out and build with with the driveways and such. However, the common area sidewalks that aren't in front of a house, we will build once we have foundations ready to pour, when we have concrete trucks in there. It's the connection to Inverness is about 1/10 of a truck of concrete, and you can't just call and order that right now. So once we're ready to pour concrete on foundations, we'll put the sidewalks in at the entrance and the connection in the back, while we have concrete crews and trucks rolling in and out of there doing foundations. The remaining sidewalks will wait, of course, until the houses are done on the side of the house, like we typically do on everything else. So I would respectfully ask for approval of the final plat tonight, subject to the conditions. And again, we are willing to accept the engineer's amount. I can tell you, it cost us $6,500 to hide reseed the lots in the right-of-way. Again, the banks were already stabilized. We can post that amount, or Daryl can come up with his own amount, and we'll be happy to post that. And I know if you were ever to cash in a letter of credit, it would become public money, and then you would have to open bid a project, and therefore it'd be more expensive than what we can do it for. So I get that, but we have several reservations in here that are predicated on certain timelines of being able to sign a contract and get started and move into a house. And so a 30-day delay puts several of those in jeopardy. Again, if we had made no effort to grow grass in July, I wouldn't be making this argument. But the fact that we hydroseeded it by TDEC standards, the site is 100% stable because we used hydroseeding. They don't wait for grass to grow. Once the mulch has dried on the ground, it's stable. So with that, respectfully, I ask for approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the 10 conditions, and if y'all want an additional letter of credit to guarantee grass to grow, I'm happy with that.
Russ, unless y'all hydroseeded today, and I'm seeing bare dirt in that picture dated yesterday. So what are we looking at here? Why does this area appear like you haven't hydroseeded or seed and strawed it yet?
Well, I was there an hour ago. I don't know what time yesterday that they took that. I know we did rehydroseed areas that got beat down in that storm on Monday, where the mulch and seed got driven into the ground, and so you could see dirt. And knowing that the meeting was today, I paid to redo it so that y'all would go out there and see it instead of waiting for the grass to pop. Those seeds will still germinate. In fact, this time next week, if you do want to postpone it, I would ask for a called meeting for next week, because it'll be green next week. So it just waiting 30 days does not make sense. We hydroseeded it a week ago. That heavy rain on Monday, that 3 inches in 30 minutes that blew out most of my landscape around my house, it beat the mulch into the ground. And so it appears more like dirt than mulch. So we went out and basically double dipped. We double downed and sprayed it again to make it look better. And I could go out there and dope it up with all kinds of fertilizer and water and turn it green and get approved, and it'll be dead in 3 weeks because it's.
You put rye on it, but that rye's going to die this time of year.
Yeah.
And we don't want you to do that.
We're using a summer mix, because all that'll be sodded anyway once the houses are grown. So we're just using a TDEC spec summer mix.
This looks like this might be an open space lot or something. I mean, I don't think that lot's deep enough. Whatever we're looking at right here is not deep enough for a house.
No.
Those obviously are pad-ready house lots.
I can show you a picture of that area I took just an hour ago. So I don't know when they took their pictures.
So what you're saying is you were back. Actually, it looks like that's a hydroseeding truck right there. That actually looks like
that is
one
their
of those.
hydroseeder.
It looks like it has the big bales of the whatever the little holes of
So here's that
hydroseeding on top.
And that was at 6 o'clock today, so you can clearly see them all.
Well, instead of passing your phone, if you want to walk down the and kind of see. I mean, historically, we have postponed for lack of effort. I think that's a fair statement. When we feel like that there's a developer that's not making a diligent effort to try to complete the items that the staff has for them to be able to be eligible for a final plat. I'm seeing some good effort here, but we also do need to be consistent and fair with what our practices have been in the past, as well what we expect out of the future. So a lot of it, I kind of got to defer to staff and kind of what their expectations are, and I mean, I'm seeing good effort here, but I also, again, I want to be fair to folks that have come before you and after you,
Well,
that we treat everybody fairly and consistently.
Well, including myself, and on Brookmere, you accepted a letter of credit to guarantee the grass would grow, because again, it was July when we finished. We dry, it's hot, the ground temperatures are high. And so you accepted an additional, on top of the millions of
Erosion
dollars,
control
on top of the erosion
With
control.
some additional, okay, didn't
Yeah.
remember doing that, but okay.
Which, well, I had that argument with Daryl. I mean, you've got a grading and erosion control letter of credit. The grading's obviously done, the erosion control's obviously in place. We've already put the grassing down. Now it's literally waiting on grass to grow. And I would just say, with all due respect to staff on this issue that I've come up heads against every time, for many, many years now working down here. Your regulations allow for you to accept letters of credit in lieu of completion. And I understand you're not going to do like City of Knoxville, where I can bond out the entire development and record the plat the same day. And we would never want to do that. That's a lot of money to tie up. But at the same time, you have the right within your regulations to accept a letter of credit for whatever you're willing to accept is not complete at the time of final plat approval. And to me, grass germinating and growing out of the ground seems like that's a pretty good thing to accept a letter of credit for, versus we don't have the roads paved, or the water line's not in, or we're not done grading, or we have a big giant mountain of topsoil sitting there that has to be loaded out and moved, and none of those are the case here. If you haven't driven by the site, it turned out beautiful, and the views from those lots of the Turkey Creek embayment are amazing. And we have worked diligently and very hard to complete this because of the high demand right now for housing in Farragut. So, anyway.
Comfortable with a letter of credit.
I
It's
have-
July, and this is a hard
Well,
time
the fix
to
for this
grow
is, Russ,
grass.
you got to stop finishing the subdivisions in July. You need to figure out a way to start
Better
finishing in
timing.
like September, October. That's the best time to get grass to grow.
If we didn't do them so fast,
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I got preliminary plat approval in October. So it's not even 12 months, so.
What is that
anyway.
letter of credit?
Well,
I don't
it's
know
gonna have
what
to be
the
up to
amount would
engineering.
be,
Yeah.
But I would
Okay.
want to
Harold
be
will set that
clear
amount.
that the staff has to be comfortable. If y'all approve it with these conditions, the staff still needs to have the cover and be comfortable with that the grass is coming in to the level that we expect for anyone else.
No, I don't, no,
'Cause
I
it's
think
clearly
if,
not right now, from our perspective, right now.
Hold on, Russ.
I'm sorry.
In the level of stabilization that we normally expect. So, but if it gets to that point, then, it's up to Daryl, but we could sign the plat if he's comfortable with it. But it might be a little while before that could happen, frankly.
that kind of defeats the purpose of a letter of credit. If I'm posting basically a cashier's check for $10,000, that would give the town plenty of money to go spray this if by fall it's not green, then why is it up to Daryl to determine that enough grass is grown?
Well, I mean, all I'm saying is, from the staff's perspective, we're just trying to be consistent with what our expectations have been in the past. I understand the problem with July. I think Brookmere was more of in January, wasn't it? It's still a bad time of the year.
We had two different plats out there. I don't remember. We posted a grass growth guarantee bond on both of those.
Other than trying to time your stabilization, but that's hard to do.
Yeah.
I understand that.
I'm just trying to look for clarity and eliminate any subjectivity. I'm certainly willing, I mean, it will take a week to get signatures. So we wouldn't even be, if we got approval tonight, and engineering still owes me a sidewalk amount, the other two, I can have the letters of credit next week. So it'll take a week to get it ready to even sign and record. And then once it's recorded, it takes Knox County a week to assign addresses before we can even apply for building permits. So if,
I think the bottom line, at least from the staff's perspective, the planning commission can, and you all have the final say, of course, and that's fine with me, but we just want to feel comfortable that this subdivision is not kind of out of control as far as erosion, that the grass is coming in, that it's not being an issue as far as stabilization, because there's a lot of currently exposed areas out there that with a heavy summer downpour, you could have some soil loss. I mean, you could have some issues, and we've seen it before. So we just are a little bit concerned about that, and I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, we're not trying to hold anybody up. If
Oh, your
my
silt fence still
mom
in?
was doing this
Yes.
subdivision, I'd have the same comment, because it's just being consistent with the expectations we've had in the past. So, again, we need to be at the staff level comfortable, if you all do approve it tonight, that this site is under control as far as stabilization before we can sign the plat.
With that being said, we're still under notice of coverage permit through TDEC.
Right,
We're
I
responsible
understand.
to the state. We're responsible to the town of Farragut, who, if we have any erosion or sediment discharge, can issue us civil penalties and notice of violations, and that has to stay in place until we're less than 1 acre, basically down to 1 lot. So with all due respect to staff, and we run headlong into this on just about every project, I know you're trying to be consistent, but that doesn't mean what you've been consistently doing is necessarily correct as far as waiting on grass to grow. The precedent you'd be setting is accepting an extra letter of credit on top of the erosion letter of credit for a site that's already been hydroseeded. So if somebody blows seed and straw, you could say, no, you got to hydroseed it. You're not setting a precedent that anybody can come in here with 30 acres of exposed dirt and post a grassing letter of credit. It's been hydroseeded. Obviously, we put seed and fertilizer in the ground with it. It will germinate. The clover's already coming up, but it'll take probably about another week for it to pop. Anyway, enough said about that. I just respectfully ask for approval subject to the 10 conditions, and we're willing to accept a letter of credit amount to guarantee the grass grows from engineering.
For all those at home, it's not necessarily as much about the grass. It's about, we don't want the mud and the silt in the street. We don't want the mud and the silt in the stormwater system. And we sure don't want the mud and the silt in the lake, which you guys are across the street of. So you think it's a cosmetic thing. This is not a cosmetic thing. This is about erosion control. And that's why I'd asked Russ if all the silt fence is up. And he indicated, yes, the silt fence is still up. I'm kind of with Louise. I'm comfortable with them posting another bond. I also don't want to put the staff in a predicament where, because we rely on the staff's eyes and ears to be able to enforce, for lack of a better word, the rules that this body and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen have put together to protect the residents of the town. So, I guess we just need some more discussion. I'd like to hear from the rest of the commission. Yeah, is this something that makes sense, or is this a slippery slope here?
Well, let me ask you this question, because I know there's two different things we're looking at. We're looking at the area that's open space, and we're looking at the area where you're going to be building. Where you're going to be building, you're going to be digging up anyway, so there's going to be, that's another issue. But whether we approve this or not, you've done all you can do at this point, Russ. Is that what you're saying? You've hydroseeded.
Absolutely.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
If we have a downpour and we don't approve this plat and we have a downpour and you see some erosion there, that's going to happen whether we approve this or not. Is that my understanding?
That's correct. Recording this plat doesn't change the situation of our responsibility for any mud in the street whatsoever, or any mud leaving the site whatsoever. All the perimeter controls are still in place, meaning all the silt fence and everything else. So that's where I don't agree with staff's historical process of literally spend the whole wad and then sit and wait for grass to grow when we've done it. I can tell you, it doesn't matter what other people do, but Farragut's the only place that requires grass mowable.
We want stabilization
So, I understand
for
that.
obvious reasons.
Well, we do too.
And
We
so do
can't, we're not going to be able to sell these houses if the road's muddy.
And
Farragut's going to issue us a notice of violation if the road's muddy, and we're going to have to, and you've seen from our past projects, nobody's perfect. Every rain event is a wild card, but when we have an issue, it gets cleaned up immediately. So I just don't see what's gained by a delay or by not approving it, because the situations that staff is concerned with are the same regardless. Nothing changes by approving the plat for recording. Nothing changes. with the situation on the ground, other than by the time it gets recorded, it's another week of germination of the seed that's already in the ground, and it's, I mean, when I went up and looked at it today on my way here, and there's just a green sheen starting to come up all over it, through the mulch, through the hydromulch, so,
And you're saying it's been hydromulch since this photograph right here?
yes.
Can you see the photo on the screen?
I don't think we have any way to sling it up there,
Can you
Russ.
pass it around?
From his email?
Mark Shipley's email.
I don't have any. way
Yeah.
to do that.
It was hydroseeded on
This picture
about the
was taken
9th.
on the 14th.
We did it a second time
Yesterday?
yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was in there, your inspector, who was that?
Shay,
That does look
Shay?
like, based upon that road going kind of north is my memory, in the shade
Yeah.
of the trees, that tells me that was in the morning,
Yeah,
is when this photograph was taken.
that's correct. And we had them go in and touch it up. The mulch and seed are still there, but the rain was so hard, when I say beat into the ground, on the pads and on the flatter areas, the mud suspends, so now the mulch is the same color as the dirt. And because of our experience in Farragut, we sent them back out there to do it again. To do it again, just so y'all would have no doubt if you drove by there that it's been covered. So I've actually hydroseeded it twice. And if we get a heavy rain again, the mulch is going to turn the same color as the mud, because again, the water suspends from beating on, the bit particles of clay around it, and then it stains the mulch dirt colored, and it looks like dirt. I'm seriously, I'm not making this up. That's just the nature of the beast, so.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
I would just comment the fact that we're looking at a situation where they've taken the mitigation and we have an additional requirement for the letter of credit. You're literally just waiting for nature to take its course. And I see no reason to hold up. If we feel comfortable with the mitigation efforts and the efforts to date to do the stabilization and the additional requirements, I think that's going the extra mile in this situation, and I think we ought to go ahead and approve it.
So are we adding an 11th condition then?
Yes.
For a letter of credit for,
For guarantee of grass growth, or however you want to call it.
Stabilization, letter of credit.
okay.
Be comfortable with the 20,000 letter of credit.
Well,
Yeah, I
that's
mean-
that's the purpose of the final plat. It's kind of the carrot and the stick. And so we know that if we hold the final plat, that's a heck of an initiative to create for a developer to be able to hurry up and get those things done. A $20,000 letter of credit is a pretty big stick to hit you with if you don't get the grass growing in a month. You
Well-
think you guys are okay with that?
In a month?
Well, not in
Yeah.
a month, but
Well,
in a reasonable
yeah.
amount of time, obviously.
Yeah.
This time of year, if we don't get any rain, you
Yeah.
may have to get some water trucks and throw some water on it.
Well,
Otherwise,
that-
any of that little tender grass that just popped up, it's just going to die on you.
Well, no, actually, that'll make it die quicker,
Throwing some water on it?
because it'll make it come up with a higher water volume than what nature's given it, and then when you don't have it, consistently, it'll die.
I'll leave it up to you guys and the
So-
experts, but I
Well,
said
this-
the carrot and
look,
the stick, if you guys are okay with that.
We're
with what the
moving
mayor
into the
said.
end of August and early September, and that is the ideal time
Once
to
you start
grow
getting some
grass.
cool nights and a little
Yeah.
more dew, and, that is, in my experience, the best time. Obviously,
The
this
reality is that 50% of the site is going to be stripped
Right.
and
right
be
back
under
in.
Well,
construction.
we want these
So-
other areas
Yeah.
that we're concerned about, especially, where
Yeah.
you abut neighbors. We want those areas definitely stabilized, because
Well,
we don't want you throwing any mud on any of your neighbors,
Yeah.
much
I don't-
less into the lake or into the storm.
We don't want it to lake it up.
No.
Yeah.
I was looking to see if anybody from town engineering was here, but we've not had any issues with sediment transport leaving the site.
Yeah, I
So-
live within a mile of that location as the crow flies to the west, and I go by there, if not once a day, at least every other day, and I've been up on that property, and by the way, they've done a really fine job of grading it too, and when I went by there on Tuesday, I was surprised after the rain event that we had Sunday night that there wasn't a little bit more runoff, and it wasn't noticeable at all, and that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
And we have recourse for that as well, and so does TDEC. So
Yep, absolutely.
I'm going to move to approve with the subject twos, with the additional subject to of a letter of credit stabilization for 20,000.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
One thing on the plat, just to run it by you all. That's the actual subdivision. One thing that, this sign actually was not on the, the streetscape plan, the actual sign itself. One thing that, that we provide for in the sign ordinance now is for subdivision entrance signs to be within the right-of-way, but they have to be reviewed by the Planning Commission and the VRB, and then recommendations made to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. This is their entrance sign. If you go into the subdivision, it's on the right. It's an open space area. The sign is proposed to be about 4.5 feet from the curb. It's shown right now to be about a 16-foot tall column. The actual sign itself was not something that you all reviewed when the preliminary plat was presented to you all. And we wanted to show that to you to see if anybody had any concerns about it, if you were okay with, that being, I don't believe there's any existing utilities that would be under it, or it's in any existing utility easements. But the sign is proposed to be about 4.5 feet from the edge of the curb. The reason for that is if you've been out there, it drops off pretty steeply, and there's really, with that plus other existing easements that are in the area, there's just not a lot of physical space. That's why they've gone with a column type sign instead of a wider sign, because they just don't have enough physical space to fit it in there. The sign itself, let me see if I can highlight it. It's in this area.
What easement is
here.
it squeezed? That sanitary sewer that you're trying to get in?
No, that's
Between
that's TVA.
Okay.
Wait, to the,
Okay.
That's where it's at right there. See where that X is?
Can you put that on one of the larger, either the plat or their,
Yeah, go
their
back
big
to the
landscape plan, so I can? I'm not even sure
Yeah.
where we're looking at. I assume we're looking at where you pull in on
It's
the
the-
right.
Yeah, you
it's
come
the right
in,
side.
It's on the right.
yeah,
And you come in
You
the
can kind of see it
subdivision.
there.
that's the, yeah, it's on the right. It was shown on the streetscape and landscape plan during preliminary plat. Obviously the sign
Problem
design
was,
and ornamental.
that was one of the subject twos that y'all didn't actually see that. That was a subject two of approval.
Mark, run back up to
So-
the plat and put an X or a box of what we're talking about here. We saw?
I can't read it there.
Well, instead of go down.
It's the cul-de-sac.
There you go.
It's,
Now show us
kind of-
where we were. See, I'm seeing what I think is a sanitary sewer easement that runs. That's actually outside the right of way, though.
Yeah,
it's
that's
close.
outside of the right of way.
Okay.
I think
That's
it's
the
in-
other constraint.
It's in
The-
this area
That's your
right
problem.
The sanitary sewer is married real close to the TVA 820, but outside of it, and then where we have to meet grade of Turkey Creek Road, there's kind of a steep slope, and that's why we're trying to use that shoulder.
In that red area, because it's within the right of way, so it's actually inside the line. It's, probably about right,
You can't see it that scale.
there.
So you're squeezed in between the
Whoop.
two.
I'm sorry. Not there.
Hey,
That was
Boy, that's a
little-
big one.
Yeah. It's basically, you come in and it's, gonna be somewhere in that area there.
no, it's closer.
Is it closer to the street?
Yeah,
to
it's,
Turkey
it's,
Creek?
it's,
That's the middle
it's
road.
10 and a half feet.
Well, I was gonna say, that's the middle of the road.
Yeah,
That's the right of way. That's
Archway.
not the road.
yeah, that's the
road
right
goes
of
down
way.
It's center of asphalt's the center of the
Yeah.
right of way, right?
No, yes,
It's
that
down
is
right in
right.
there. Yeah.
No, it's 4 feet behind the curb, 10 and a half feet behind the
remember
Turkey
the
Creek
scale
Road
was.
right of way. So we're 10 and a half
So it's
feet
lower,
behind
yeah,
the
it's-
Turkey Creek right of way,
It's down
4
close to
feet
that
behind
little
our new
dot,
curb.
basically.
So and we've approved some things similar to this before, but don't we require a plat note that says, hey, if somebody runs over that, the town's not responsible for it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Okay.
something that we would need to have on the
fine with
plat,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Is that something that we're approving tonight? Does this belong in the subject to?
Well, I mean,
Because it's
it's,
not in the subject to right now.
yeah, it's kind of an afterthought because it was, when the sign was applied for, we noticed its distance, and, it wasn't noticed on the streetscape plan.
Okay.
When that was reviewed.
what are we normally, like 10 feet outside the right of way?
Yeah.
Can you go back to the sign?
Yeah,
Has
Yeah, normally.
VRB looked at this yet?
yeah.
I think it's a good looking sign.
Yeah,
quite
it's a
frankly.
good looking sign. I don't, yeah.
There's no power to it, right?
No, there is. Just landscape lighting.
Yeah, it's a good-looking sign. I mean, I don't think that's,
So it's a little over 10 feet off the right-of-way of the road, Turkey?
it is about.
I can't read
yeah,
that small number.
Yeah, it's 10 or 10 and a half feet behind the right of way.
Go up on that.
Basically, I placed it looking at the design speeds and classification of Turkey Creek Road and trying to keep it far enough behind there. And then being that our road is a stop intersection, the travel speeds will be so much lower that the clear zone of 4 feet behind the curb is enough to clear side mirrors and stuff at those kind of speeds to cut down on any kind of safety issues.
Yeah, normally, when the Board of Mayor and Alderman reviews this too, they can impose restrictions or, liability language that they may be comfortable with. The town attorney may need to review that before it goes to the Board of Mayor and Alderman. Now, if you're turning in there, you're going uphill, so it's not like you're coming down to the sign. So it's not really, at least from my perspective, really a hazard.
If you hit it, if you hit that heading east, it's just going to keep you from swimming because it drops straight off to the lake down there. So
You hit that 5 feet behind the curb, you shouldn't have a driver's license.
that's right.
We just need to be clear about the maintenance and the liability of it, and that's something that
Right.
ultimately the Board of Mayor and Alderman, because you all have control of the public property in the town, can impose whatever restrictions you all are comfortable with.
I'm
allowing the sign
comfortable
to be
recommending
there.
that approval of that to the Board of Mayor and Alderman.
Okay.
Russ, has
anyone
it been
else?
determined where the mail kiosk will reside? Is it going to be behind that signage or
No,
at the end of the cul-de-sac?
It's going to be at the end of the cul-de-sac.
End of the cul-de-sac, thank you.
Any more questions or comments?
Is everybody comfortable with
Are we
that?
adding that as a,
Need to amend the motion.
amend the motion and add a 12th?
Yeah.
Yeah,
item?
you could do that, just to be on. Again, it has to go to the board anyway, and you can certainly do more there if you need to, whatever
All
you
right.
feel comfortable
Then I'm
with.
going to amend my motion to add a 12th, subject to recommending approval of the sign to the Board, Mayor, and Alderman.
Because it's
Is that-
part of a streetscape plan, and that is something that you all are allowed to do, to allow it in the right-of-way if it's part of a streetscape.
Okay,
And maybe the
approving this-
logic in this case might be the topography and just the lack of physical space to fit something in there.
So we're approving the location of the sign due to topography in the right-of-way. Approving the sign in the right-of-way due to topography.
Recommending that.
Recommending.
If that's what you all are comfortable with.
Again, second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Do we need a second vote on that, Mark, or is that amendment okay?
Peace.
I second it.
Think
Second it again.
Ed
Yeah.
seconded it, yeah.
Okay,
So
Thank you.
we'll hope for a light rain.
Steady.
thanks.
For the next, yes.
Item number 7, discussion on a public hearing on a site plan for Moses's Water Sports, Parcel 176.02, tax map 130, 11470 Outlet Drive, Zone OD-RE/E, 6.8 acres, Urban Engineering Incorporated.
This particular piece of property is just to the east of Buddy Gregg Motorhome, and that part of Buddy Gregg Motorhome is not in the town, it's in Knox County. So the access is off of Outlet Drive. There will be a request for a variance from the distance between driveways associated with this site plan that we'll need to consider first. But just giving you a little bit of an overview, this piece of property is in the Outlet Drive Regional Entertainment and Employment District. It's a boat sales business, so they obviously would have boat storage and sales associated with the business. Outdoor storage and sales are actually permitted in that zoning district, but you have to screen them so that, screen those areas. They have to be designated and designed for storage and sales, and then screened so that they're not visible from public rights-of-ways with opaque materials that are architecturally compatible with the primary materials on the building. This is a one-story building. It's about 16,000 square feet. In this zoning district, the masonry requirement is a little bit lower for this size building. They can go down to 60%, basically 60% brick. They're at about 63.7%. The remainder, most of the remainder is being proposed as EIFS, as an accent material. One thing about this site, if y'all aren't familiar with it, this whole general area has a lot of sinkholes. And that's one of the reasons why the development is that far back from Outlet Drive. There's a sinkhole in between the parking lot and Outlet Drive. There's also other sinkholes, a couple of them that are partially on the property, and certainly some that are to the east, a very large one to the east. So one of the things that we want to be clear about on the staff's perspective is, tree cover within areas that are in sinkhole lip elevations is considered an environmentally sensitive area. So it's an area that really can't be disturbed now or ever, really, because that tree cover is very important because it performs a lot of very critical stormwater absorption and filtration functions, because a lot of the water in this general area drain to these sinkholes. And so if you take out or affect the vegetation cover, you can have some serious issues with, or more likely to have issues with, the sinkholes, either clogging or having, issues with more dissolution. So, it can create some issues. So we just want to be clear that, this is maybe not going to be a very visible location from Outlet Drive or from the interstate either, because of the presence of sinkholes and the fact that the tree cover within those areas is something that has to be left undisturbed. And that's one of the comments from the staff's subject twos, is that needs to be clear on the plans, that is a requirement. There's a couple of design questions that we'll get to as well, dealing with the building, the iconic element and the cap, and having a well-defined cap. But I think the first thing that we would need to look at would be the access variance request. There was a letter that was included in the packet describing the rationale for the variance. Basically, the access, one of the comments from the staff was to see if the access could line up. Let me see if I can show it up here. The access to the Tapestry apartments is in this area here. Over, you can see that red. So their access is about from center of driveway to center of driveway, about 72 feet from that. And this is a minor arterial in the town's major road plan, so it's supposed to be at least 400 feet apart, the access points. The justification for putting it where they're showing it is that it's one of the things is topography and the lack of really, frankly, physical space to really line it up on the west side of the property line. And the fact that there's an existing electric utility pole in the area that would have to be relocated. It's hard, it doesn't really show up very well there. And then finally, the town engineers looked at this with the project engineer, and he's comfortable with the variance. It doesn't really create, where they're showing this access, any conflicts in the center turn lane. So we are comfortable with granting a variance in this case, given those conditions that are inherent to the property. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on that, but like I said, the town engineer is comfortable with that as well, and we do support the variance from the distance between driveways requirements from 400 feet to 72 feet in the case of the access for this project. Does anybody have any questions?
Chris, I'll ask Chris, the engineer, but Chris, why don't you state your name Address for the record before we get started.
Sure, Chris Sharp, 11852 Kingston Pike.
I suspect a boat dealership's going to have a lot of tractor trailers coming in to deliver boats. You've got some interesting serpentining going on there, and with that access, do you feel pretty comfortable that you've got it set up for somebody to come in with a 53-foot trailer and be able to get in and out of there and get offloaded? And the reason why I say this is what we don't want to see is a tractor trailer stuck in that center turn lane and offloading boats out in the middle of Outlet Drive. And I'm not going to pick on any of the car dealerships, but there's quite a few car dealerships on Kingston Pike and Parkside Drive that unload their vehicles out in the middle of the road in the center turn lane.
Kingston Pike, yep.
Well, actually, I may ask Chris, what's your largest vehicle? I'm sorry, yeah, that's a good question.
Chris Finch, Moses Water Sports. The way that we.
An address, please, an address.
Yes, 1063 Lexington Drive. The way that we unload tractor trailers is much different than how cars do it. We actually, and with the way Chris has the property designed, they'll come in the front, we take our boat lifts, we lift it up, the trailer moves out of the way, and we set it back down. The main point that I'll put to that, you said a lot of tractor trailers. Our primary manufacturer is Malibu and Axis, made right here in Knoxville, and so we actually trailer those directly from the facility, so they don't come in on tractor trailers. We only have.
So you say you might bring them in like on a flatbed, just two at a time or something?
Malibu Axis, we trailer in one at a time on the back of a truck.
Regular boat trailer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that solves
Yeah.
a lot of it. I just didn't want to make sure you're accommodating. When you do get a tractor trailer, you can accommodate it. It's not stuck out in the right of way.
There's no way in the world I would allow my guys to unload a boat on Outlet Drive.
Okay. Especially if you're unloading with a fork truck, you're out there and you're blocking traffic.
Well, the way that the system that we use is actually huge A-frames that go over the trailer.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's not even something conceivable on our part.
My concern is a little bit more of, I don't know how comfortable you are saying this, how many boats do you sell a year?
Not enough.
When you can get them. When you can get them.
Good answer.
My concern is amount of storage. This looks like a pretty small parking lot or lot for the amount of storage that you probably maybe sell 200 a year.
So if you look at the property we're located in today, the outdoor area is probably a quarter of what this facility is.
Okay.
So the way that this facility is going to be laid out, and the reason that we're thinking about, we actually have the opportunity to buy our building that's in Knoxville, but what makes this so perfect for us is the additional outdoor storage. I have two stores, one in Knoxville, one in Chattanooga. This outdoor storage is actually larger than what we have in our Chattanooga store. So between the facility having approximately 6,000 to 8,000 square feet inside, we'll have over 2 acres of paved land outside. My guys are loving me for giving them this much room.
Okay.
When we look at our inventory, we try to turn our inventory 3 times a year. So therefore, we're not having 200 boats at one time on the lot.
Well, quite frankly, with the boat manufacturer so close, you almost operate like a just-in-time inventory system where if the boat manufacturer doesn't mind holding your boat there down in Vaughn or wherever it is.
Well, to answer that question very precisely, we will sell next year. We will sell about 50 Malibu and Axis boats, and those are spaced out over 12 months. So you do the simple math. You're talking about 4 boats a month coming in at any given time. Now, right now, my lot has 1 boat, 1 Malibu on it. So, but even in a normal time of year, we may have 15 Malibu Axis boats, and that's our primary boat that we sell.
I guess my understanding is that in March, you really want 75% of your inventory on hand in March. Is not how you guys do it?
No, not at all. The way the boating world works, between ordered boats, we probably, the biggest time of year that we have the most inventory is actually probably in December to February. But I never want more than 50% of my annual sales on my lot. If I get more than 50% of my annual sales on my lot, I'm in trouble.
Sometimes As a boat manufacturer, especially because the seasonality of it is what's driving that, is October to February, March is when they're not selling and they're still producing. So they're sending them out to you because they don't want to keep them on their lot. So they're sending them out to whoever's ordered whatever. So that's my concern, is just storage. And you're saying that in the acreage you have, you're going to have storage. The other concern is shielding it, because it makes me wonder if you even need an iconic element, because who's going to see the building, because you're going to have the building, when you have a boat on a trailer, it's pretty high.
Well, I actually brought some glossy pictures that I'll share with you of other dealerships. And one of the things we are going to ask for a future variance on is on the screening, because it's not like we're stacking cordwood out there, or we're, stacking whatever. These are $100,000 boats. And when we have the boats on our lot, we merchandise the boats just as if you would merchandise the inside of a retail store. And like I said, I have some photos of not my dealerships, but other dealerships that, to be honest with you, the look of the boats actually accent the property to make the property look better. Because once again, we are a high-end boat dealership. We're not selling, 30-year-old used junk. We are selling $150,000, $200,000 wakeboard boats and runabout boats. So,
Well, the challenge is, if you decide to get out of the boat business, your zoning district allows other things, and somebody may not be selling $100,000 boats anymore. They may be selling things that are not near as pretty as your boats. And so we kind of have to think about you, and then we got to think about what future uses, and then we have to think about another applicant that might come in this zoning district along Outlet Drive, and what their needs are. We also know that to a certain degree, your boats also help sell. And so, to a certain degree, you kind of want people to kind of see your boats, so they see you have inventory. And if you're successful, you're producing more sales tax dollars for the town and the county and the state, and that's good for all of us. But it's not just as easy as say, "Oh, don't worry about it," and because your boats are pretty to look at.
Absolutely, and I think it's in the wording of the ordinance that we want to look at. I certainly don't want to tell you that we don't have, Johnny who brings an 85-year-old boat in and wants to know if we can work on it. That's a different story.
Let's do this for just interest of time, and also to stick to the agenda. Sure. Let's focus on this particular agenda item before we kind of get off into a rabbit hole on some of the other things. It's a pretty unique site, quite frankly. You're going to have a lot of natural vegetation that's going to surround you. That is going to, and a lot of it's going to be a no-touch area. And when we say no-touch, we're real serious about that. We have a tree ordinance in the town of Farragut, as well as some sinkhole ordinances and environmentally sensitive area ordinances. And so, especially some other folks, including Top Golf, we kind of lectured, or maybe I think myself, I kind of lectured them. You guys don't go into that right of way and start cutting down all the trees. Now, you guys aren't up against the I-40 right of ways. I think you've got a little funny triangle of Buddy Gregg's that separates you from the I-40 right of way. But I do think what we don't want you doing is going in there either on Buddy's, I say Buddy, I don't know Buddy, but whoever owns Buddy Gregg Motorhomes, on their property and the right-of-way, and trying to open that up so people can see your boats, because, that's a big-time violation. We don't want to see you get in trouble, but this is the same conversation I had with Top Golf, and we're excited about this. This was a unique piece of property that took the right type of user. You kind of understand some of the constraints with it, and I welcome you to the town. I think there's a demand for this. I think, obviously it's pretty hot right now in this economy, and I think a well-run boat dealership will survive even when the economy dips a little bit, and you guys have a good reputation. I've kind of checked you guys out, and
thank you.
But let's focus on what we're dealing with tonight, and kind of these items. I think we've got some architectural things that we need to talk about, and then
and if I may just 30 seconds.
Sure.
On the sinkhole issue, this piece of property is 6.8 acres. We're only looking at developing a little over 4 acres of the property. So we have built in the area for the sinkholes, and we understand that they are, because of the topography of them, that they're not of any use to us. So we completely understand that.
Yeah, and what we're real serious about. You can't you can't send a Bobcat down in there and start clearing the brush out. I mean,
Absolutely not.
those sinkholes are part of our water system here in East Tennessee and our karst topography, and so it's important that we're not
Absolutely.
getting in there disturbing those.
Question right now is the access variance. That's the first item.
I did talk to Daryl about it, and we were kind of in agreement. I mean, he's fine with the placement of the driveway. There are constraints that limit. I mean, we can't line it up exactly. And either way we cut it, it's going to be a slight offset. So he was comfortable with where we're showing it.
You couldn't snug it up against that property line with Buddy Gregg is because you got a topographical challenge there? Is that?
Well, I mean, if I snug it right against it, I'm going to have a retaining wall in the right of way.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I figured. So there's some topography issues.
And our
what I'm
radius-
looking for the hardship.
Yeah,
the
our
reason
radius-
why we would grant this variance.
Our radius return would be in front of Buddy Gregg, which is kind of frowned upon typically, so.
Yeah.
And as far as
The right-of-way actually is doing some funny things. I didn't realize the right-of-way.
that was the Knox County / Farragut
Okay.
joint venture ship, so right of way's always goofy on those, so.
Yeah, okay.
Good.
Essentially, it doesn't matter what goes in there, you're going to have that same challenge.
That's exactly right.
That's right, yes.
Still got to work with the topography. I'd like to make a motion. Variance based on the topography, limited space for lining up the access, and also the conflict with existing utilities and conflict with the center line.
I'll second Ed's motion.
All those in
I've got one concern that's not been addressed on this. Well, no, not on the variance, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So on the
Read it. I'm
variance,
sorry.
Yeah, we're still on the variance.
on the variance, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Now, in terms of the site plan itself, there were quite a few subject tos, but I kind of went through and circled them from my perspective, and the vast majority of them are what I would consider minor or just clarifications, clerical items that we typically would have for most any project, or reminders and things like that. I don't know if there's any questions or comments that you all have on the 18 subject twos, and that I did not include the discussion about the architectural design standards. We can look at that as well and to see get your all's thoughts about the icon, at least from the staff's perspective, the iconic element and the defined cap. You may have other things you want to talk about, but we can look at that later. Like I said, there's 18 subject twos, but a vast majority of them are pretty much just housekeeping items. One of the things that is, like I mentioned earlier, required in this zoning district for the storage and sales, and I think I emailed this out to you all ahead of time, is the screening. What they're showing on this one, the screening is required to be opaque materials that are architecturally compatible with the primary materials on the building. Primary materials on the building are masonry, 63.7% basically brick. So the columns that they're showing here would be brick, and then they're having a wood slat fence is what's being proposed at this time, and it would be an overall height of 4 feet. One of the comments that the staff had was whether the height was great enough to screen, to meet the screening requirement, since these boats would probably be on trailers, I guess. And I don't know if topographically it's not an issue, but it would seem to me that it might need to be a little taller. But again, that's something that I did want to point out, and whether you all feel that the language in the ordinance that relates to this has been satisfied with what they're proposing. There's a little bit of subjectivity in what is architecturally compatible. They do bring in some elements of the primary building materials. The vast majority of the screening would be a wooden fence. So again, that's something I think you all need to weigh in on and be comfortable with. And I'm not sure if screening would be needed on the south part of the property. Honestly, given the distance between the the building or the area of storage to the interstate right-of-way, it's about 400 feet, I believe. So it's a pretty good distance, and it may not be necessary back there. They're not showing it back there, they're just showing it in the front at this time.
I mean, are they even going to need it in the front with that sinkhole and all the vegetation in it?
The thing is, we can't, even though, we have the protections in place for the sinkhole, you have to consider in the winter, it could be more visible, more open, so we have to go with some kind of more or less permanent type of screening that's not dependent on just entirely on landscaping. That's why that language is in there, that it has to be opaque materials that are architecturally compatible with the.
Well, you guys probably want it fenced for security anyway. I assume you don't want somebody sneaking on there at night and driving off over the curb with one of your boats.
The topographical nature of the property, that's going to be virtually impossible because the elevation of the property above the road, we'll be able to block the whole property essentially by putting gates across the driveway. But, and because of the sinkhole and the vegetation will make it impossible to do anything other than use the driveway of the property, which makes, not to get into the variance we'll ask for later, makes it, once again, a question on do we need an opaque material that is going to be blocked by woods anyway.
I think you do. I think it needs to be 6 foot, matter of fact.
The fence is kind of, if I can draw this straight, it kind of goes like that.
And then
Reason being is, we have had, sure, there's plenty of woods there now, but for some reason or another, somebody comes along and cuts that, then there you have it. The fence is not.
They do get fined for that.
Sure they do, and they pay it and smile and go on.
Significantly.
And respectfully, we are like 15 feet above Outlet Drive. So, I think from line of sight, if I can demonstrate, I can submit a supplementary drawing. If I can submit a line of sight drawing that shows that 4 feet is sufficient, I don't have it with me tonight, but would that satisfy the height requirement?
What you're saying is you're going to be looking up onto a little
You're
plateau
looking
on a hill.
You're looking uphill, right? So, I'm not saying, I haven't done that, so I'm not saying 4 feet will be sufficient. Maybe 5 feet, it may be 6 feet, but I'm saying if we can demonstrate whatever height require,
We've done some things, some sightline drawings like that. Think about the building over here where
HVAC
Starbucks is, where we talked about some of the parapet screening and so forth, where we said, okay, there's, different topography allows for some different screening applications. So I'd be comfortable. I'm not sure how we would.
We'd have to put that in the
Yeah, it would
And that's
need to be-
fine. And
it
I'm
would
not
need to be tied in
necessarily
tonight.
And I'm not arguing, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
I don't know,
I
I haven't
understand.
done that work,
Yeah.
but I can do it fairly quickly and painlessly, so.
At some point, we're in addition to this, we are going to need to talk about the blue ephes. The reason being is I picked on the credit union a couple of years ago about doing a bunch of blue on that building that wasn't necessarily in our color palette, and they scaled their blue back, and so we've got to be consistent with what we've done in the past. And maybe you guys can elaborate a little bit on, your building's a good-looking building, and I see a ton of brick on it. And then I see you're trying to identify, I guess, the entrance to the showroom, the sales floor.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a swatch of that blue of what you have in mind?
That blue actually is on one of our
Subject to.
colors. It's one of our colors in our
Okay, so
palette.
that's off of our color palette?
Yeah, I
Okay.
sent that to the architect.
No, that's great. I just
Because
wanted to make sure.
it was a brighter blue. It's hard to
Well,
tell
we had
with
the other
these
blue
kind of-
for the credit union was like a violet,
Yeah.
wild, super intense
This
neon
is
blue.
this is a lot more toned down than
Okay.
what was originally
Well, no, if it's on the
submitted.
color wheel, you guys are good to go.
Try blue for water.
Blue for water, yeah. There you go. Okay.
I have a question on this drawing here. What's the wall structure? Is it concrete block? I know you got veneer brick on there, but is it a concrete block structure?
I'll be glad to answer that question. Stacy Cox, Studio 4 Design, 414 Clinch Avenue. The building is actually a pre-engineered metal building, is the superstructure of the building, and what we're actually doing is we're going to use the brick as the rain screen veneer over a metal panel substrate. So there won't be any block at all in the building other than the brick masonry that's used as the facade rain screen. And the whole front elevation, as you noticed, is all brick, all the way up to the coping. We've got this tower element, the blue element's ephes, actually the lighter element that picture frames the garage door opening and the large window, it's also brick. We've got brick on 2/3 of the sides, and on the back is where we start to drop off on the brick and have more ephes. But as you can see there, the brick basically stops about the top of the garage door openings in the back.
So does the veneers satisfy our requirement for masonry?
63%, I think.
I mean, it's
60
the
Yeah, we're
exterior.
a little bit over the minimum requirement.
Okay, I'm good.
Goes a brick.
Best looking pre-engineered metal building in East Tennessee.
Well, one other thing I want to bring up is you guys, the issue of compatibility on the fencing, the fact that we're using the wood material, we chose wood for two reasons. One, obviously economics, and because there's a lot of wood in front of it and trees and everything, and I know that's been an issue whether you can see it or not. But brick is a horizontal material, and we chose a wood horizontal slat to sort of express that horizontality. And our idea is that we would stain that wood to match the brick color, so that we have the brick piers every so often, and we have this horizontal dark wood stained or painted material that would also match the color of the brick. So we feel like architecturally we've achieved compatibility in color and texture, and also introducing some of the masonry to get that sort of to blend in with what we're trying to accomplish there.
I agree with the mayor in the height of the fence. I'd rather see something higher than lower. And I'm sure his boats are very nice boats and all, but still, we have to consider other options in the future. And if we open it up now, somewhere down the line, we will end up with something that we don't, maybe not as nice a looking for sale as his boats were. So regardless of the vegetation in front of it, I agree with the mayor. I'd rather see a higher fence than not.
Chairman Holliday, can I ask you a question about that? Because Mr. Sharp just indicated that with the sight lines, the fence, where that fence is going to be 15 feet above where we are on the road. So with a 4-foot fence in front of that, the line of sight is such that you won't be able to see, unless that boat is right against the fence, you won't be able to see it because of line of sight. If we approve it with the idea that the line of sight is what is giving you the shielding, are you comfortable with that or you're not comfortable with that?
No,
Okay.
I'm afraid down the road, we're going to have a piece of property that, and it'll come back to haunt us again.
Well, if there were heights, I mean, we know how tall the maximum height of his boats and trailers, you could limit the merchandise to a certain height. I'm just thinking out loud, I don't know, and I don't know that 4 feet will suffice, again,
I mean, I'd be open-minded to getting it approved tonight, and then re-looking at this at another date with the line of sight. Because, I mean, I think if topography improves the screening situation, you should get the benefit of it. I don't think we should just necessarily say you automatically got to do X when you have topography. Obviously, if you were lower down, that's going to exacerbate the problem because you're looking down into your site, but you guys are up kind of on what I assume is going to be a little plateau by the time it's graded.
Well,
and so I'm kind of open-minded to that. I don't think we necessarily, hold you up and say, well, let's look at it again. Let's look at the whole project next month.
And I understand.
So I'm kind of open-minded to say, hey, maybe get you approved if you guys wanted to come back to us with some line of sight drawings. Then this body of 9 of us can make that decision at that point of whether or not you've met the intent of the screening requirements.
Now, I understand not wanting to set a precedent. I completely understand that. I mean, there's a difference between storing construction cranes and storing, high-end boats. And I don't know how tall the booms, probably 10 feet, probably 10 with trailer boats with booms, probably 10 feet. I mean, I don't know.
That's probably pretty tall. I'm surprised. Well, they might be. I guess if you've got your wakeboard tower up there, they might, with the tower up, it might be 10 feet.
Probably
so.
10 feet.
It's actually 9.5 feet.
So I don't know. I don't know that 5 feet may be high, 6 feet, 8 feet. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm looking at the drawing here, and it looks like the road is 970,
That's what I got.
and it looks like where the fence is 990, 989. So it
It's
looks like we got
quite a
20
bit higher,
looks like we got
so-
20 feet or so.
It may be
Yeah.
20 feet higher than outlet drive.
So-
And again, I don't know the specific, that's
So
why
I'm
I'll have to
inclined- I'm
look.
inclined to agree with Commissioner
Offered to
Myers here
look
that
at-
we can take a look at that. at a
What's
later
that?
date.
Yeah,
He's offered to look at this line. So I'm open to consideration.
I am
of that,
too.
Because, but I'd like to see, I can sketch out something here and understand the concept, but I'd like to
Right.
see some.
We'd like to see you put it in
dimensionally
CAD
scaled.
and,
And I will,
get the
yeah.
distance and the vertical correct instead of us just kind of guessing about what the angle is and so forth. So-
And that's what I'm
But I guess
doing now.
You guys
I
aren't
don't
building
know.
this fence anytime soon. I assume what you want to do is be able to get eligible for a grading permit and
That's
start moving
it.
some dirt.
It'll
So
come-
what happens with this fence tonight, it's not, it's not going to hold you up. So,
But you can lay it out where you can show the center line of the road or somebody in
I
the
can't- I
road.
mean, I can-
And the angle, and you can even block in just a block that represents a boat.
I can accurately,
And
I
we'll
can
see
give you an
what-
accurate profile. We did the same thing on Horizon Plaza.
Yeah.
Yes, with the dumpster screening side.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I mean, it's something that needs to be addressed pretty soon because, we need to have a complete site plan set before we issue a grading permit, really. And that's to me, a really important component of the site because it's a real important requirement in this zoning district for outdoor storage and sales is that you provide for the screening of those areas because most areas of the town, that's not even allowed. So,
Yes.
Yeah, we've stuck with screening all across the board. I mean, we did within home and everybody, Gander Mountain and everybody else. So, I mean, to back off on that, I'm not comfortable
I'm
with
not
it.
saying I'm not willing to throw out a screening requirement at all. I'm just saying, these,
We're just
for
talking
instance,
about
with
the
the John
size
Deere
of it.
dealership, we said, all right, let's try to find what kind of the middle ground is. It still meets the intent and still allows them, obviously you're selling boats or tractors, to a certain degree, you want people to see them, but yet we have screening requirements. I guess what I'd like the applicant to know is we're open-minded to this. You might come back to us and we say, well, gosh, you got to have 8 feet of screening, so just keep that in mind. I mean, there is a little bit of risk here because of our screening requirements, that depending on the use here, of course, if you didn't have the outdoor sales here, it was just a parking lot, you wouldn't have to have any screening requirements. Obviously, you're being very transparent up front with us about what your use is for this particular building, and so we're telling you up front, hey, there's some screening requirements when you've got merchandise, whether it's boats or pallets of mulch or tractors. If it's outside, there's some screening requirements. So,
All we need to see is the actual data to make a decision on. It's not a matter of their screening or no screening, it's a matter of the height of the screening.
And
And without that data, I'm not willing to kind of guess one way or the other yet.
I agree. But what I think what you're generally hearing, at least for most of us, is that we may get you approved tonight. That way you guys can go and work on your subject twos and your revisions, and get you these other things with the screening. But you get you one step closer to hopefully getting eventually across the finish line.
What we need to do, I mean, I can have a line of sight profile to you all tomorrow. But we don't want to wait a month for a grading permit.
I suspect, as you can see, this is a sensitive area in the town of
It is.
Farragut.
No, I
I
understand.
suspect staff's going to want planning commission to be involved with this. This is probably not something that staff's is going to be comfortable with trying to say yes or no that, the 20 feet of topography change and the screening material, et cetera, et cetera. So it's probably going to have to come back to this body.
So what would this body feel comfortable with the understanding that if I can demonstrate that our 4-foot fence is fine, then can we amend an approval? I don't know how that works.
Well, I think we're going to have to. I think all of us, at least myself, I'm a visual person. I'm going to need to see that, and we obviously, and we can't vote unless we have a called meeting. We're not too excited about having a special called meeting, but Mark, if they could get their other items addressed. I think I'd be comfortable with getting them a grading permit to get kind of rolling for clearing and grubbing and grading. They meet all the other requirements.
I guess my point earlier was I don't want that just lingering out there. And it really needs to be handled by the August meeting.
Yeah.
That
Why can't we make that
aspect
an
of it.
agenda? I don't
That's
know.
really what I was kind of talking about. Sometimes these things.
I don't either because I'm a scatterbrain, admittedly.
I'm fine with, working with them in that regard with the understanding that has to be clarified one way or the other in August and then reflected on an updated site plan set.
question, Mark. With all the asphalt that's going to be put down, do you have any problems with the drainage and the sinkholes?
Well, Daryl's looked at that. I know he and Chris have talked about it, and I think my understanding is that the town engineer's comfortable with the drainage plan and the drainage calculations.
Okay.
And I've coordinated permitting with the state as far as the sinkhole part of it, so I anticipate their permit any time, so.
Okay.
So the one thing we need to discuss is the iconic element, or we have.
Well, it's up to you all. Just in looking at it from the staff's perspective, there was a question about whether they've satisfied the iconic element. They're using the entrance feature, which is one of the options in our architectural design standards. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just bringing it up for discussion, and then whether there's enough of a defined termination to the roof line, cap, for this building. And there may be other things that you all want to talk about in terms of the architecture, but that was a couple of things that, to me, I thought we might want to think about and discuss and just make sure everybody's on the same page with it. So the blue area is kind of the area that is the iconic element for this project.
Pretty iconic.
I don't know, and Stacy could speak to this, but as far as a cap on the building, or what they're proposing there, I think there's some coping along the top, but you might want to speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do there, Mark, is similar to what we've done with other buildings that have been approved, just have a really sort of heavy contrasting coping line that's across the top of the building, similar to what we did at 35 North and Horizon Plaza, that's hopefully going to be under construction soon.
It looks more substantial on top of this lower section here than it does on the front section, that the.
Yeah, and that just may be the way the rendering's translating. If you look at the brick colors that are actually the samples of the brick that are on the lower left-hand side of the drawing, they're much lighter than the way it's rendered, so I think you'll see a pretty substantial contrast on the top of the coping line when it's actually finished.
Is this building going to have signage on it, or what are we doing here?
Yeah, I think they designated general area, this rectangle.
In
I'll
that
show you.
box?
Yeah, that's kind of where they're
Yes, sir.
thinking about signage, which is good. I'm glad they're thinking about it on the front end. Of course, it's this general area here. And that'll be a completely separate review and approval process, but, I mean, physically, it looks like that would be, an area where you could fit a compliant sign for sure in that space.
Yeah, and I think that diagram represents the calculation we thought would fit per the ordinance, Mark.
And that's good, because we're trying to encourage that in the sign ordinance for applicants to think about the signage, all signage on the front end, instead of kind of an afterthought, kind of like the landscaping sometimes is as well. So that's good.
Get your dead wood back there, behind that ephes. Give you guys something to attach to. Use the plywood or something, use like 3/4 inch plywood.
It's expensive stuff now.
Some of this will have roll-up doors that are on the different parts of the building. There'll be roll-up doors, so to kind of break it up across the length of the building.
So I assume that no one's have a problem with these iconic element, the architectural design standards. Everybody's fine with how it
Good.
looks.
Something that we don't see there is the heat and air units. Is this going to be open garages except for where the blue's at?
The side to the far left there is the service area of the building. The mechanical units are all on the ground on the back side, so they're package units that sit on the ground low on the back. Nothing on the roof.
Right over here.
I think they're right here. If I can highlight it.
I don't know where you
Wrong
are.
place.
Here?
They're under that overhang, where that,
Yeah. I can't get it to highlight. I don't know what's going on. But
What-
it's, basically, if you look at that elevation on the lower right, it's the far right end of that.
Kind of where the lean-to is back there?
Yeah, that's just a covered,
Protrusion is, it looks like it's about 5
That's-
feet tall. That's
that area is not where the units are. They'd actually be on this back elevation in between the openings, sitting on the ground on concrete pads.
So they'll be screened then, obviously.
You won't see them from back there, yeah, that's
Okay.
true. Yeah.
Pull up the site plan there, Mar.
And quite frankly, if they can put them on their site and they're not seen from adjacent parcels or adjacent right-of-ways, I don't care where they put them.
That's true.
Yeah, that's the requirement, is they can't be visible from adjacent.
Uh,
I couldn't find them.
Wow.
I can show you.
Yeah, I think we can see
We
that.
found it over here. It's not on that one,
The
no.
one they sent us earlier
The
didn't have
package
that.
we had,
I guess
it's
you
on-
gave
but
them
it's on
later
this
on.
one.
Yeah,
It's on the south side of the building.
yeah.
Okay.
HVAC, yeah.
Yeah, we see them there now.
Yeah, it's on the south side.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, it'll have fencing.
So are we ready for a motion? Aside from number 10, which is the screening of the storage areas, we remove that out, remove that from the subject twos, and because it will be discussed next month.
You may need to leave it in the subject too,
Yeah, no,
quite
yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Height is to be determined.
Yeah.
Determined.
Mm.
So I'm going to amend number 10 to say height to be determined
By a subsequent planning commission meeting, I guess.
in August. How about we say in the August Planning Commission, August 2021 Planning Commission?
Chris, you comfortable getting some of those cross-section line-of-sight drawings?
Yes.
Okay.
From all directions where there could be seen. I don't know what can be seen from Buddy Gregg or what, I guess on that side it wouldn't matter anyway, but on the freeway side, if somebody was to cut those trees, then we will make sure that that's not a visible.
Yes.
So I'm going to move to approve with the amended number 10 and 8 other 17 subject twos.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So we're moving on to item number 8, discussion on a request to consider the site-related elements of expanding the dining room for approximately 500 square feet at the Big Kahuna Wings, 12828 Kingston Pike, Big Kahuna Wings applicant. And this is for discussion purposes only tonight.
Yes, it is. Hold on one second, let me get to that.
My Kahuna wings there.
This is basically, this is a discussion to get some feedback really related to parking. The owner would like to expand the dining area at the Big Kahuna Wings, which is at the southeast intersection of South Hobbs Road and Kingston Pike. The parking and loading requirements in our zoning ordinance for restaurants, there's, as far as required parking spaces, it's 1 space per 100 square feet of gross floor area, and 1 space per 200 square feet of discernible outdoor dining area. The gross floor area in this context includes accessory buildings. This site has 2 buildings on it. It has the main restaurant on the west, and then there's another building to the east that's about 1,400 square feet. When we talked about this at the staff developer meeting, it's our understanding that the building to the east is not really being used as accessory to the restaurant, so it's really that's one thing to talk about a little later. But it's apparently just a building that's being used for personal unrelated storage at this point. So if you just take the required amount of parking, there's 26 parking spaces out there. Currently, if you just count the restaurant building based on its square footage, there'd be 22 required spaces. The existing restaurant's about 2,081 square feet. So if you did factor in the other building on the east, add that 1,400 square feet, then you end up with 36 parking spaces that would be required, so they would be well below what's required if you factored that in. They're wanting to add about 445 square feet to try to improve the ratio of dining area to kitchen area to make it more compatible with other restaurants. This is kind of a older restaurant. Well, I mean, it was completely renovated several years ago, but it still has a lot of initial design challenges just because of its original age and configurations. So the desire is to, expand the dining room area and to really lessen wait times, improve the customer service. So when you add that 445 square feet, that puts them right at 26 parking spaces if you don't count the second building. So a couple of things in relation to eventually a site plan for this expansion would be, one, understanding that the building to the east really, it can't be occupied and it really can't be accessory to the restaurant because otherwise it would put the parking ratio well below the required amount of parking. The other thing that I think most of us are aware of is that really functionally there's a parking shortage on this site. It's a good problem to have. The concern from the staff's perspective is if you're going to park, in an area, then it really needs to be in an area that meets the standards of a parking lot, whether it's through shared parking arrangements, but it still needs to be, on an improved surface, whether it's asphalt, concrete, permeable pavers, that has the proper configurations of a parking lot. This site really, unfortunately, doesn't have a lot of ability to expand parking on the site without some really significant modifications. There's a large detention basin on the south end of the site that basically wraps around the whole south end and kind of comes in behind the little 1,400 square foot building to the east. So you'd have to really completely redo that to free up space to the east in addition to demolishing the building to the east. It's doable, but it would be, a pretty big undertaking to do that. The other option is, currently they're kind of, I guess it's mostly employees, are really kind of parking over on the property to the west, and there's quite a few cars there. And that's, again, a good problem to have, I guess, and we're not certainly, from the staff's perspective, we're very supportive of the ability to have an addition, associated with this business. It's just, I think there needs to be movement in a direction of providing for compliant parking if you can't physically provide it on the site, whether that's to the east or to the west, through shared parking arrangements that are provided for in the parking and loading section of the zoning ordinance. That would require some, cooperation with adjacent property owners. But, we do have certain standards that we expect, just kind of like we were talking about with the subdivision earlier. And if you're going to have an area where people are basically permanently parking, it needs to be brought into a certain standard that we have in our zoning ordinance. So that's the other kind of consideration. It would, if you don't count the second building, they would meet the technical requirements of the parking spaces. They'd be right at it with the addition. But I do believe at least from the staff's perspective, there needs to be a plan put together for how they're going to deal with the overflow parking. We have that problem with 35 North. It's been tremendously successful, and we're very pleased about that. But at least they're parking in areas where it's an improved parking lot. It may not be on their property, but they have some shared parking, or they're parking on the town's property on the other side of Campbell Station Road, and that's kind of what we need to be moving toward, I think, in this location as well. Just wanted to present it to you all to get your feedback and thoughts, or, because they need some direction before they go through a formal site plan submittal as to what your all's thoughts are.
First of all, I have a question. I'm trying to figure out which drawing is best. I guess the one you have up there now. If you look at the new addition, 360 square feet,
Uh-huh.
if you look just below that, there's another little square.
That's another addition area.
That's
It's
what?
those two together is the 445 square feet.
No. Directly below, there's an unmarked square. And I think that's a refrigeration area or a storage area. So I guess I need to know what that is.
Yes, it's refrigeration that we put in. We had submitted. The only thing that's left to do is get the fencing around it.
So does that need to be, or is it a part of the 2081?
You don't occupy it.
No, well, I don't know. That needs to be addressed with the site plan. I mean, to get that brought into.
Before we get any farther, can you tell us who you are and give us
Sure.
an address?
It's Matt Beeler, 12828 Kingston Pike.
That's not something you occupy, though. It's a refrigeration unit,
Like an air conditioner.
so it's not part of, I would consider it part of the square footage for the restaurant.
No, it's.
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I have to look at the.
It's
how
an
the,
outbuilding that goes all the way back to aughts. And I'll make a quick public statement. Unlike the last time that this property came before us, I do not have any ownership interest in this. I sold this to Mr. Beeler, the applicant, a number of years ago. So I have zero interest in the business or the real estate. But anyway, that little building actually goes back to a little storage building that was there for the past 30 years. That was when it was the old Ott's Barbecue, is the little building that we're talking about. And it was just a little shed on a little concrete slab is what it was.
I mean, if it's being used as an accessory to the restaurant, then it would count toward it's part of gross floor area.
Refrigeration would be?
Yeah, because that's area devoted that's accessory to the restaurant. Yeah.
How would that be different
How
from
would that
the
be from an
air conditioning unit?
unit?
Yeah.
Or heat pump or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, I may be confused.
It's a mechanical piece of equipment.
On what you're talking about. Maybe I'm confused.
Well, I mean, there is a little raised flower bed that's in that aerial photograph.
The covered area?
But the area that's kind of adjacent to that sidewalk
This one
is a little refrigerated unit, which is.
Is
which
it covered and enclosed, or is it?
It is enclosed. I mean, you can walk inside of it.
not
It's like a little
covered.
walk-in
It's a
refrigerator.
refrigerator storage unit.
Yeah, if it's covered, it's part of gross floor area. Yeah.
It's not covered.
Well, no, I mean, what he's saying it's under a roof is what he's saying.
It's not under a roof.
Oh, it's just the unit, just the box itself.
Correct.
If it's just a screen wall, then it wouldn't be.
Okay.
So in my consideration for this, the accessory building to me is what is most important because it's literally personal use and it's not used at all for the restaurant. The restaurant staff doesn't do anything over at that building. Unfortunately, it's on my land and there's not much I can do about it, but it has nothing to do with the restaurant. And I understand we have a parking issue. I'm very thankful after the last 18 months that we do. But if we meet the technical requirements for parking, if that building is not an accessory, then why do I get punished and have to spend a bunch of money to pave a lot that's not even mine?
I'm going to, I agree with you. You are meeting the requirements of our parking, our ordinance. We have an ordinance, one spot per 100 square feet, and you have the parking spots to address that. If you were opening and we didn't know this, we would be permitting you to build this particular. If you had just bought this whole property and you said, I need this much square footage, we said, you've got enough parking, you go for it. You're not going to be using that building. That's a personal use building. It's not used as an office. It's not used for anything but your own thing.
Maybe just storage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't have an issue with this. I understand that you have an inventive solution for what has become a parking issue, but I don't think we can hold you to a different standard in our ordinances that we don't hold to other people. So I'm comfortable with this. You're dealing with it right now with the niceness of Doug Horn to allow you to use property that he's not developing. Someday, you may be put in a position where you're going to have to figure that out.
Right.
But he meets our current ordinance requirements. And for that, I don't have an issue with him wanting to expand. I think if he meets our current parking ordinance requirements, I don't have an issue.
I do want to add, too, that the biggest issue we have right now with our parking is that a quarter of our people that are parking are waiting. And because of the percentages that Mark was talking about, typically when we submit a site plan, we're going 60% front of the house, 40% back of the house. We want the front of the house to have more because obviously seats mean dollars pays for the entire project. Because of the original Otts building and then the redesign, and then redesign when I did it, it's more of a ratio of 40 to 45% in the front of the house and 60 in the back of the house. So in that, if I had that flipped where it was back of the house, if that building would have allowed for that, the seating would have been sufficient. And what it does is then 25% of my customers who have parked in those parking spots are not waiting, they're actually eating, which turns that parking lot quicker, creates less of an issue. That's part of the restaurant business that a lot of people don't understand. If they're waiting, they're not spending any money, but they are taking up space, they're taking up parking spots, they're taking up your staff time to try to take care of them. Whereas if we have them at a table, now we can get them served and they can leave satisfied, and the parking can't do anything different than it is right now in my eyes. They leave if it's full. It changes nothing, except for the fact that I might be able to sit them quicker and turn that parking lot a little faster.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I think he's looking for direction from us because I guess this comes back as
A site plan, yeah.
a site plan, but he needs to know how you guys feel before he starts spending money. So he needs to hear from the planning commissioners. Where are you on this idea? Because it's expensive to put site plans together, and he's a small business owner, so he needs direction from us.
Well, I think you covered it. I mean, he's not using this single-story accessory building over there as part of his restaurant. Has another usage, personal usage. So, with that said, the parking's sufficient for what he's asking to do, in my opinion.
I agree.
concur.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
I do too.
Keep in mind, Matt, if you wanted to lease out that little building, the old grooming shop building, this would prohibit you from being able to,
Sure.
lease it out to a tenant.
And quite honestly, that was what I thought was going to happen when I bought the property from him, but she moved out just before then. So. But no, at this point, the restaurant's the most important, and after everything that's happened, I've got a closed restaurant in Chattanooga I'm trying to pay for, and thankfully we've got two here in Knoxville that are still open. The focus is the restaurant, and if I had enough money, yeah, I would literally gut the whole thing and start over, because again, 50 years of different builds created an interesting building, but it's iconic, and thankfully people enjoy coming in. So for me, that's all that matters. And I'm happy to do site plan. I just want to know for sure that I'm approved, that building's not an accessory, and I'll put forth the money pretty quickly.
We probably just need something with the site plan that, notes that that building cannot be occupied and it cannot be used as an accessory to the restaurant. Be real clear about that.
And you're fine with that?
Yes.
Stipulation?
I mean,
Okay.
if it's my personal use building and I'm the only one using it, that doesn't matter, correct?
To me, it doesn't, because you don't need
As long as
more than one
you're
spot,
not trying
parking
to put
spot.
customers over there or
Right.
tenants in there or, serve food over there or anything like
Correct.
that. So, I mean,
I have no problems with
Okay.
that.
Take that building.
Don't have a garage door or anything like that, does it? Okay. Just curious.
You got something you need to store?
I'm trying to get it out of there.
I started to say, I'm nosy, what have you got in there, but just personal.
Hot sauce.
Right, well, restaurant equipment tends to continue to gather. We tend not to throw it away in case we can, use a part off of it or something like that, which actually usually never happens, so, and the rest is, unfortunately, as all of us humans are, we tend to start collecting stuff. My house isn't big enough, and my wife won't allow it, so. Thankfully, I have the building to be able to use it.
I need one of those.
Me too.
So this was just for discussion, so I think
Right.
you have an answer.
Okay.
You have direction now?
Confident to go.
Yes, sir. I'll get site plan. And again, I just didn't want to spend the money on site plan if that accessory building was going to be an issue. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt?
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks.
Item number 10, discussion and public hearing on a future land use map amendment. Request for a portion of the property referenced as Parcel 069, tax map 142, north of Old Ingalls Building, 20 acres, to change from future land use map from medium-density residential to high-density residential. Horn Property Incorporated applicant.
Do you have some people that want to speak on this? Just as an overview of this particular request, go ahead and get that. This is a request to change the future land use map for part of this parcel. This is a 41-acre piece of property, and the request is to, it's all currently designated on the future land use map and our comprehensive land use plan as medium-density residential. And that basically is areas that have been identified as maybe being appropriate for densities of 6 to 8 dwelling units per acre. So their request is ultimately to rezone, which is a different action item, the next item, the lower or southern roughly 20 acres of the tract to R6, which is multifamily residential. And that district provides for potentially up to 12 dwelling units per acre. So that would exceed the prescribed density associated with the current future land use designation of 6 to 8 dwelling units per acre. So to be consistent, which we suggested the applicant, they needed to at least try to change the future land use map so that if they were successful in changing that the future land use map would be consistent with their zoning map amendment request. And the future land use map would need to be high-density residential for an R6 zoning district request. So that inconsistency between the future land use map and the zoning map has always been a point that the staff has mentioned when the applicant has come before us on this matter in the past. So they're trying to attempt to address that at this time through this future land use map amendment. In looking at this or any other change to the future land use map, some of the things that staff takes into consideration would be what are the current future land use designations in the surrounding area. What is the developed, the existing plan of development in the area? What's the current zoning in the general area, and what's the infrastructure situation in the area, and whether the change to the future land use map is compatible with all those considerations. So in looking at that, what we did was just kind of looked at the area and then kind of started comparing it to what's around it in those different with those different considerations. So to the immediate north, of course, it's medium density residential, and that's not being proposed to change, and that's really currently undeveloped. If you go to the south immediately, that is actually a B1 buffer zoning district. It's a tree-covered area between their well, it's kind of on their property, but it's basically to buffer them from the old Ingalls shopping center development. And if you go south of that, you've got an area that's zoned general commercial, C1, and that's the old Ingalls shopping center building, and really the whole area to the west as well. And if you look at that area on the future land use map, it's purple, and that's mixed-use neighborhood. So when you look at mixed-use neighborhood, that allows for a density of up to 8 dwelling units per acre, which is consistent with medium-density residential. And that would have to be part of a larger kind of neighborhood convenience commercial development. That's a future land use that's commercial in nature, but it has a provision for the allowance of residential up to a density cap of 8 units. To the east of the area that they're requesting to change, you got the Village Green Village Green subdivision, part of that, and Boring Road. The Village Green, that part of Village Green is shown as very low density residential, 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre. Really, frankly, the developed density in Village Green is really under 2 units per acre. If you go to the west immediately, you've got the Villages of Farragut Senior Living Community. That currently has 88 suites. There's a plan to be about 38 units in the memory care and about 64 independent freestanding and two-family buildings. So the density basically at build-out for that is roughly 8.23 units per acre for that senior living community. So that's the most, kind of the highest density that you've got in the immediate area there. If you look at some of the surrounding subdivisions, you go northwest to Baldwin Park, and they have a developed density of about 2.46 dwelling units per acre, and then Waverly Court, that is over on Smith Road, is at about 4.37 units per acre. There's no properties in the general area that are currently designated as high-density residential. So really, in just kind of basing the staff's assessment of all those characteristics and considerations of the immediate area surrounding this, the request to high-density residential would provide for, developed densities that would really notably exceed both the prescribed and existing developed densities in the area. The densities that are provided for in its current land use designation would be more compatible with the things that I just mentioned, like the mixed-use neighborhood, for example, or the senior living community density to the west. As far as the infrastructure, we all know that Boring Road is a pretty substandard road, that section, and certainly any development that happens in this area would probably have a required access to Boring Road as well as Village Commons Boulevard to the west. So that would require some significant improvements to Boring Road, especially for, a high-density residential land use and zoning district, because you're putting a lot more potential traffic in the area. I know that the intention it's been expressed during previous meetings that the intent here is to construct a senior targeted apartment development, basically, with a density of really around 10 units per acre, and that's fine. It's just the town has a limited ability to control that. A lot of that can be ultimately market driven, and that's something that really would have to be something we would think about, because it's really the town itself has limited ability to to control those aspects of the project. So really, from our perspective, probably smaller footprint buildings, less height, would be more compatible with the various considerations that I've just covered. So we would not be able to recommend approval of Resolution PC-21-11 to change the future land use map from medium-density residential to high-density residential for this part of this particular parcel. Anybody have any questions on that, or?
Let's hear the list of the people.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mark?
Yeah, applicant's here.
Obviously related to the next item too, but yeah, that's.
Is the applicant here?
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Michael Patterson. I'm the Executive Vice President of Foreign Properties. Our address is 412 North Cedar Bluff Road. I have with me tonight John Wright. He's been the development manager on this, and the two of us have kind of been working this hand in hand with Mark over the last several months. It's interesting. John and I were sitting outside just kind of discussing this, and as I sat there and thought about this particular application in front of you all this evening, I thought to myself, you see in life how things just kind of come full circle, and this is kind of one of those moments for me. I've been with Doug for almost 25 years now, and in 2010, we sat in his conference room at Cedar Bluff, and the Planning Commission then had put together a committee. And at the time, they were developing a land comp plan that was going to be the guide and benchmark, for things to come in this city for the next decade or longer. And they were kind enough to come and meet with Doug because Doug's a large property owner here in Farragut. And this particular tract behind Ingalls, the one we're discussing this evening, at the time we were discussing the 41 acres, and now we're here before you tonight. We've reduced that down to 20, but at the time, back in 11 years ago, it was 21 acres. And we sat there with the members of the commission and talked about our long-term goals for that property, what we envisioned. We had always talked about bringing a road just west of the Farragut Press at that signal and signalizing that intersection and kind of bringing in a nice boulevard, and then from that main road, it kind of branching off. And at the time, assisted livings, think about it, 11 years ago, those weren't popping up. They were kind of the new, fresh idea, so to speak. So that wasn't really part of the discussion, but we definitely, at that time, we were talking about multifamily. And 11 years ago, that seemed like a good idea, and it was adopted. Until 2018, had we been here 3 years ago, we could have, what we're presenting tonight, more than likely would be passed. It was 8 to 12 units per acre. We're now asking, we're in that 9 to 12 range, but more specifically, we're at 10. And, Mark made a good point. Well, if you approve this, yeah, clearly it states 9 to 12. We're here in front of all these people, in front of the television, and just we're here for 10 acres or 10 units per acre. That's our goal. If we could get 10, we don't need 12. And ultimately, we don't want to put together a multifamily unit that this particular unit is cohesive with what's around us. We've got the assisted living, the memory care is coming down the pike. We're talking about a senior living development, a community of 55 or 50 and older. There's not going to be 18-year-old kids driving in late at night, playing the radio loud, speeding, throwing litter on the. It's none of that. These are responsible adults, and you kind of hate to say this, but the transition is you come to this senior development, and then as you get older and your body is somewhat limited, you transition over to the assisted living, and then, maybe the memory care, hopefully not, but potentially. But that's kind of our goal here. Again, it's just kind of come full circle. In 2018, it was changed, and now we're asking for part of that property, not the 41 acres, but 20, to just come full circle again and say, hey, look, for 8 years it was okay. It was adopted. Up until 4 weeks ago, if you looked at the land comp plan, it was still showing the old plan there. So, but that's kind of what we're looking at. I mean, if you look to the south of us, we've got the Ingle Center that we developed and then sold to Robert Ingle. So I don't think most owners of shopping centers love multifamily behind them. That just increases foot traffic within their stores. To the west, we've got the assisted living, which is, per our math, we were a little bit over 9 units per acre, but I think, I'm sure Mark's right at 8.4, but, here we are at asking for 10, so, and then another good thing, too, that I think that needs to be brought up is the fact that Boring Road, it's an old road, and it's not being utilized. There needs to be improvements there, and Doug Horn has said if we're granted this and we can build this senior facility, we will contribute to the road improvements along Boring Road, which is another positive. So I just wanted to say that and just kind of give some history. I know some of you all weren't here, 11 years ago when that was brought to our attention, but I remember it vividly and quite well, and I just wanted to kind of, we thought it was interesting how things, again, are just kind of coming full circle here. So that's really all we had, and if you all have any questions from us, please feel free.
Does anybody on the planning commission have any questions?
I'd like to state for the record that I was part of that steering committee that helped put that land use plan together, and some sort of a senior living multifamily component was something that Mr. Horn talked about. We did, in fact, change the density a couple of years ago in those in that particular area. There was a rationale of why we felt like that the 8 to 12 was maybe not as appropriate as what we thought was back in, or 6 to 12.
Yeah. Yes,
Back in, we thought it was too big of a range in 2018, and so we did in fact change the land use plan, which does make it more challenging for you guys to fit based upon the density that you're proposing. But I just want to let you know that you are correct. I do have memories of that, and I have been involved in this process for a long time with the Planning Commission, and do remember those. I don't remember specifically in his conference room, but I remember Mr. Horn being a part of the outreach that we did with the town and the citizens.
Yeah, again, I'll try to limit my talking here because I know it's late, but at the time it was the 41 acres, and I do just want to, emphasize that we are asking for 20 acres now. Hopefully that's, and in doing so, the goal for us was to leave the additional 21 acres to the north of this 20 acres as a buffer. So eventually that will be developed. Doug and myself, we're not saying that that's going to be green space. I want to be transparent here. But maybe we're at R2 there, or R3, or R1. So there is going to be a buffer between the potential senior development and the Baldwin Park development just to the north of us there.
I'm just going to provide a little bit more history to that. In 2017 was when we started the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Steering Committee update. That was, if you look at our policy number 2, which was adopted with the original land use plan, the Comprehensive Land Use Plan should be updated as often as necessary to remain current. Even if no major changes occur, the plan should undergo a major review and update if appropriate at least once every 5 years. So it was adopted in December of 2012, and somewhere around March, April, May, I don't remember what it was, mid-2017. We decided to revisit it in certain corridors. We got through Watt Road and Snyder Outlet and McPhee, And in those conversations, and we had had conversations previously, that the medium density being 6 to 12 units per acre was something a lot of residents were concerned about because it was such a wide density range. So that was where that was inspired from. It was certainly came from feedback, and we amended it at the Planning Commission level. That was one of our text amendments, along with some of the map amendments that we've done. So just so you have clarity about where that was inspired from.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I think that's responsible of any municipality to relook at these things because growth, there's always, especially Farragut, we've seen a number of people moving in here. I know in my own neighborhood, I see a lot of California tags and New York tags. So I think that's ultimately a responsible part that you all took. And, you mentioned 2017, so here we are almost 4 years later, and it's almost kind of like, well, we're saying, let's look at it one more time. Not the 41 acres, but just the 20. And now that we kind of have a vision, whereas before, you throw this blanket zoning on it, but there's no planning from the landowner. And again, we're developers here. We're not landowners. I want to make that clear. We own it, but we develop properties. Doug's developed over 22 million square feet of commercial and thousands of acres of residential. So, as times change and communities evolve, you go in and you say, okay, this is a need here. And we truly believe that. We've got people from really all over the Southeast that are calling us, hey, we've got this senior development idea that we'd like to do, and we'd like to partner up with you. And so we think there's a need here. We truly do. We wouldn't be here before you tonight if we didn't feel that way. And if and the demand. And again, this is something too. I want to preface that, you think of multifamily, $900 to $1,200 a month, or I'm not sure what the going rate here is anymore. Things have changed so rapidly over the last 6 months. It's kind of hard to keep up with things. But this particular development is probably a $1,500 to $1,900 a month unit. It's high end. It's looking for people that are having a hard time taking care of their home, mowing the lawn, pulling the weeds, painting the house, that sort of thing, and they want to simplify things. And the demand is there, and in Farragut especially.
There's a whole industry right now in the publishing world of senior living monthly, new senior living. I get about 5 or 6 of these magazines, these trade magazines a month, and 10 years ago, those publications didn't exist. So that speaks to the popularity of the kind of thing that we're proposing.
I just wanted to add a few more things to what's in our land use plan. That was the language that was originally adopted in the land use plan when it was approved in December 2012. In Chapter 2, they talk about transitions, which is something we've kind of talked back and forth about. But it states in here, to protect existing neighborhoods from incompatible new development and to encourage gradual transitions even with the new development, the following guidelines should be applied. If a density different from the adjacent properties proposed, the transition should occur within the proposed development. And it gives for example, if a new development within a medium-density designation were placed next to an existing low-density neighborhood, single-family homes should be placed along the common boundary with duplexes and townhomes placed further away from the existing neighborhood. So we already have an example of what they're talking about, what seems to be a good transition and a good use in the medium density in our transition language. I will also point out to you, policy number 4 states the base density assumed for the rezoning of a parcel is the lowest density of the designated range. So whether we changed it from 6 to 12 or left it at, or changed it 6 to 8, you were still, the base density assumed for a rezoning request was 6 units per acre. And then the rest of that statement says the town will consider granting higher density in the range relative to demonstrated significant public benefits to be achieved by the project. I have to balance what you're saying because I think that senior living is very much in demand, and that is a very appropriate place for senior living. But there's all kinds of ways to do senior living. And certainly, we have to consider the built environment around it, which is primarily residential and primarily low-density, single-family, detached residential. And the attached residential is low-density. The attached Village Green duplexes come in at 2.87 units per acre. Boring Road, of course, is R1. Countryway is R2. Village Green is R2. Waverly Court is the densest, and that's at 4.37 units per acre. So I think my struggle is the density and the scale and the form, given what the overwhelmingly what the surrounding residential built environment is. So that is what I'm struggling with, and why I'm leaning towards keeping it medium density for myself. And now I'm going to stop, because that's all I had.
Does anybody else on the planning commission have any questions or comments?
It seems to me that this is something that we've revisited a couple of different times, and I think we have a pretty passionate neighborhood base of some adjacent properties that have some concerns here. But it seems to me that there could be some horse trading, for lack of a better word, on the rest of your medium density. So you've got medium density that runs all the way up to Boring Road. You've got the tract between Waverly Court and Baldwin Park. And then you've got another medium density area identified that goes basically up to, I'm going to call it Ben Boring's old barn, which so it seems to me that you might be able to get some support for some higher density down close to the Ingalls if you would, let's say, agree to change and lower the density that you're kind of eligible for on the land use plan up on Boring Road. Maybe it requires a couple HOA meetings to see if you got folks that kind of are thinking this. Again, I'm one person on the planning commission. I cannot speak for anybody else but myself. But you have eligibility in these areas that are 6 to 8 units per acre, and like what Louise said, is generally if you read exactly what it says, and you're dealing with other areas that have lower density, you got to yield kind of to the low end of that, which is 6 units an acre. But quite frankly, 6 units an acre is still a lot of density. If I was a homeowner over there on Boring Road in one of those neighborhoods, 6 units an acre behind me gives me some concern. And so if I had a developer saying, hey, if you'll acquiesce to some higher density further away from you, let's say back behind the old Ingalls, and you'll agree to kind of reduce your density, and this would probably require a land use plan change and then also a zoning, and determine maybe an R2 is probably, you've got some R3 there, and you've got R3, which is Baldwin Park. And we're kind of getting on to the next agenda item, but this all keystones together. Both of these agenda items tonight, they're all talking about the same property. And you've got some R4 over at Waverly Court. But it seems like, again, that there could be some horse trading that could be done to agree to go to a lower density around these other areas. And then you might get some support, because I think there may be some concern here that you're asking for this area of higher density, the 20 acres, and then what's to keep you from coming back in a couple of years and saying, hey, you said we're eligible for 6 to 8 units on the rest of this. We want to do what the most we can do for 6 to 8 units an acre all the way up to Boring Road. And you might get some support from both the Planning Commission as well as some of the neighborhoods by doing this. And it's a little difficult to negotiate something like that in this particular setting. If it was me, I would meet with some of the HOAs and see if they think that's a good idea. Now, I may be off in left field, and they say, "Oh, that Commissioner Myers is an idiot, and that's a dumb idea. We're never going to support anything that's higher density down by Ingalls." To me, quite frankly, it meets the transitional zoning. You've got C1, and then maybe you went from C1 to R6, and then maybe you started stepping it down to match densities of Baldwin Park, which is R3. It seems to me that meets exactly what transitional zoning is all about. But there is some fear here, I assume, there's some fear here by some of the residents that this is just the beginning of, or maybe the existing, the senior living, which is villages, maybe they think, well, that was the beginning, and now they're asking for this, and what's to keep them from going all the way up? So it's just a food for thought that that might make it more palatable to more folks. That you might still be able to achieve, ultimately the senior living kind of multifamily project that you want.
So apart from future considerations that you're talking about, as it looks today, you're mainly talking about the boundary marked up there along Boring Road, the lower part of Boring Road.
No, that's not the agenda item tonight. I guess what I'm doing is I can kind of see some concerns, and I can hear some concerns on the Planning Commission, and I can see a lot of folks in the audience with stickers on their chests, and so, and I don't want it to turn into, as a Planning Commissioner, it's not about a popularity contest. It's about what's fair and consistent, what's compatible with adjacent zoning, what's consistent with the land use plan, what's consistent with what we've done in the past. And so I guess what I'm saying is, we're not talking about all the way up to Boring Road tonight. But I kind of get the sense that as much as I would like to see a project, kind of what you're describing in this area, I'm one planning commissioner, and I don't think the consensus of this board is going to support what you guys are proposing tonight. And what I'm trying to offer you is maybe there's another way to be able to get your project across the finish line, and maybe you got to give a little to take a little to be able to get the density that you like. It may not work, and I'm just throwing it out there. We can't negotiate tonight because it's not even we're not even talking about the rest of your other property that you guys own up there. But if it was me and I was one of those homeowners, that would be my concern.
Well, I know this is not the place for it, but I'm perfectly willing to meet with any individual homeowners, any HOAs, and talk about possible adjustments to what we've got that might make things more palatable for people.
I think that's what the citizens that are here tonight would like to see.
We
They'd like
do
to see
have
some outreach.
As I mentioned earlier, we do have some citizens that
Okay.
they have signed up to speak, so.
And maybe it's time to, and you guys, if y'all want to yield the floor, I think we've got some citizens that'd like to, that have asked to be heard, and they have as much right as the rest of us to be heard, and we'd like to hear what they say if they still want to speak.
Absolutely. That's fine. Thank you.
Mark has some cards that people have signed up that they would like to speak.
The first one is John Holztrager, then after him is Michael Wilson.
You just have two, that's it.
Two that have given me blue cards.
Hi, everyone. John Holstrager, 345 Bernie Circle in Farragut. I'll be Captain Obvious tonight with my sticker on. I think you know where I stand, and I've got several community members behind me that are opposed to high density in this area. I think there's three elephants in the room. First is traffic studies that we've seen are not very believable. They make statements like there will be no impact or a very negligible impact on Farragut if we do this. If that's the case, I would say, then why do you need to widen or improve Boring Road? There's going to be an impact. Now, if we were a town where we were well under our capacity, I might buy that argument that I've seen these traffic studies make, and you've got more capacity to handle that, but we don't have that. And if you drive in Farragut, if you live in Farragut, you know that there's just not enough capacity for traffic. I think the other one is what Horn Properties proposing just kind of doesn't make sense. They're proposing dropping something that has very high density into an area that's almost surrounded by low density. Just doesn't seem to fit to me. And I guess the last thing I would say is that the community is kind of worn out over this topic. You know, we've had to listen to Horn Properties tell us for years, for the last 6 years, how much we need multifamily. Anybody in the room here in favor of multifamily? I don't see them here. Maybe they're here without a sticker, but we've played this back to you folks and to BOMA for many, many years now. We do not want multifamily in this area, and there were some that would say they don't want it in any area in Farragut. You can deed restrict it, you can fancy it up, you can charge a lot per month, but it's still a property area that would be non-owner occupied, which is what really concerns citizens that I've talked to. I'm in weekly contact with the 20 largest HOAs in Farragut. None of them support this. I don't know how many are represented here tonight, but no one in the HOA community is supportive of this. I'm not saying we won't listen to Horn Properties if they want to come and talk to us, but I don't think you're going to get a lot of support. Personally, I'm not speaking for the community or for Baldwin Park, but I would support a low-density residential development here that has single-family homes. And if Doug were standing here, I would tell him the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to remind you one thing, I've got, everybody's limited to 5 minutes, so I'm keeping track of that. I just wanted to mention that.
Madam Chair, before I start, can I have a handout for the board that has some diagrams from KGIS in my comments? Michael Wilson, 412 Eisenhower Street, Farragut, Tennessee. Good evening. First of all, I'm here speaking as a private citizen, and my comments do not represent any opinions of any groups that I belong to. I've always come before this commission and commented on the consistency of a request with a comprehensive land use plan and the zoning ordinance, and tonight will be no different. In 2015, I led the arguments against the Smith Road Apartments, namely the development's inconsistency with the comprehensive land use plan. Ultimately, that request was denied due to these inconsistencies. In 2018, the town developed a high-density land use description, but has since failed to develop the requisite intent, location, or character descriptions. As well, the town has not reviewed the remaining large vacant parcels to determine which should change to high-density residential. The only updates to this land use description identifies a density of 9 to 12 units per acre. Failure to define these characteristics and the lack of parcel designation makes evaluating this request more difficult. To me, the fundamental question is, can this 20-acre parcel be changed to high-density residential while protecting the existing neighborhoods through the appropriate density transition? Per Exhibit A of the resolution, Horns Properties is retaining a medium-density residential tract of land to act as a transition between its high-density residential development and the lower-density properties. This approach is consistent with the plan as it transitions density from the commercial development along Kingston Pike to higher-density residential, giving way to medium and lower-density residential properties to the north. The second concern is about the actual density of both the high-density and the medium-density residential areas. The transition policy on page 12 of the land use plan does not clearly define gradual or compatible. For example, there is no specific formula that addresses the maximum density differences of two adjacent and differing land uses that have a common property line. Recent history shows the FMPC and BOMA have liberally applied the transition requirements to different situations. In 2016, the FMPC approved a recommendation allowing 150 feet of open space and Union Road to be an appropriate transition between property zone C1 commercial and very low density residential R2. The recommendation was for the prior Swan Farm development that never came to fruition. The current Swan Farm development provides a transition from the commercial portion of the property using medium-density residential and medium-density residential equivalent, and Union Road is a transition to very low-density residential to the north. The Overlook apartment property was rezoned R6 and is adjacent to an existing R2 parcel that contains a private school. Finally, the FMPC and Board of Mayor and Aldermen approved the Kingston Pike Village request that placed a planned commercial development district adjacent to a property currently zoned very low residential R1. The last two examples do have unique circumstances, including topography and the type of surrounding development. Of these three, the Swan Farm example is the closest example to tonight's situation. Based on these previous approvals, it seems reasonable that surrounding this high-density residential development with the road and then subsequent medium-density residential development is a suitable transition and consistent with the CLUP and the recent FMPC decisions. Unlike 2015, I don't believe transition should be a reason to deny this request. Thank you. And I would say one more thing. The diagrams show you those are from KGIS and show those areas where I describe the different types of densities that have been approved by the board and by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the commission and the board. Thank you.
That's all I have on this particular agenda item.
Mark, You had said something about a change. Are we voting on this tonight?
Yeah, it's up for a vote, yep. The way it's crafted as with any resolution is resolution, if you support it, you vote yes. I mean, you know, if you don't, then you'd need to be clear about that you don't support it. And then if people agree with that, then they would vote yes, because that would be the motion that they would be following. So if that makes sense.
We need a motion from somebody. And they'll know what we're talking.
It's pretty clear to me, but maybe I didn't describe it very clear.
Once we have a motion, we'll figure out how to proceed.
Does anybody have a motion?
No.
Nope.
So, Mark, are we,
It fails.
A motion even though we're going to vote it down.
Well, I mean, they offered to have a discussion with the people that live around them.
Well, the motion can be to defer. But I mean, you got to have a motion. You got an application.
I'm going to make a motion to deny the amendment to the future land use map.
I second that.
Hold on.
all those in favor?
Mark's got something to say.
What's the motion?
My motion is to
Wasn't loud
deny
enough to hear.
the amendment to the future land use plan.
To deny.
To deny.
Motion is to deny
Motion is to
resolution
deny.
PC-21-11. And who was the second on that? St. Clair. So if you agree with that, you would vote yes. If you disagree, you would vote no.
Is that a roll call vote?
You need me to do a
Yes.
roll call?
Yes, it
Okay.
does need to be.
Commissioner Myers,
No.
Commissioner Russ?
Yes to deny.
Okay, yes, okay. Commissioner Green?
Yes to deny.
Mayor Williams?
Mayor Williams is yes to deny.
Chairman Holliday?
Yes to deny.
Commissioner St. Clair?
Yes to deny.
Vice Mayor Pavlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Bellamy?
Aye to deny.
Commissioner Preston?
Yes.
Okay, the motion to deny passes 8-1.
So we don't really need to have much discussion on the next one. I'll just make a motion that it's to deny based on the fact that it's not consistent with the land use plan.
Second.
Okay. Let me take a roll call on that one, too.
Okay.
Can you repeat your motion, Louise?
Motion to deny the request for the zoning map amendment based on the fact that it's not consistent with the land use plan.
Okay.
Okay.
There are citizen comments for item 11.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, we do have one.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. Did have one for Michael Wilson, number 11.
Again, Michael Wilson, 412 Eisenhower Street, Farragut, Tennessee. Good evening again. As discussed in the previous item, I led arguments against the Smith Road Apartments in 2015. This was my first involvement in the planning and development issues, and I quickly learned that you must make decisions based on the town's ordinances and the comprehensive land use plan. As it happens in these discussions, in 2015, many residents raised arguments regarding traffic, schools, noise and light pollution, crime, etc. However, we learned that in order to prevail, we must debate the consistency of a request with the town's ordinances and plans. Adherence to these documents provides for fair and equitable treatment of all landowners and developers. Ultimately, in 2015, the final argument came when I showed that the Smith Road Apartment site plan would not be consistent with the comprehensive land use and other town plans as required in the R6 zoning ordinance. Mr. Horn would probably agree that this was the final nail in the coffin. In looking at the current proposal, and again, this is based on approval of the last item, I took the same approach as back in 2015. I asked the question that you should ask yourself. Does this request support the strategies and does it align with the comprehensive land use plan and the R6 zoning ordinance? With respect to the land use plan, this development supports 4 of 8 strategies. The development addresses strategy 3, encouraging grading housing choice. The developer's willingness to make this a 50-plus community provides a housing choice not found elsewhere in Farragut. The additional residences in this area would help attract and retain businesses within the Old Ingalls Shopping Center, furthering strategy 2, repairing aging shopping centers. The internal connection to and improvements of Boring Road, along with the potential new walking trail connections, address strategy 4, increasing connectivity. Finally, the request addresses strategy 8, planning for the remaining parcels. The development is consistent with the statement, quote, Farragut's vacant land provides the best opportunity to move beyond traditional suburban development patterns to achieve land uses that will bring about a more complete community, unquote. This senior apartment community is unique to the town. It is consistent with the surrounding land uses and will, quote, help Farragut provide a greater range of housing options. As discussed during the previous agenda item, there are no high-density land use description characteristics to consider other than density. Often people argue approval provides the opportunity to develop at the maximum density 12 units per acre. This is only true if the developer can comply with all of the requirements in the town's plans, the applicable zoning ordinance, and the development manual. Many restrictions such as setbacks, height restrictions relevant to other less dense developments, etc., will impact the final density. The R6 zoning ordinance general description says, this district, quote, this district shall serve as a transition area between more intense land uses or major roads and less intense land uses. It is clear from attachment A of agenda item number 10 and the concept plan that this development will provide for such a transition between the commercial property to the south and the lower density neighborhoods to the north. I started my comments tonight by stating I've always come before this board or before this commission and commented on the consistency of a request with the comprehensive land use plan and zoning ordinance. Based on my analysis, I believe this request supports several of the comprehensive land use plan strategies and is consistent with the plan and the ordinance. And one more comment. I lived in Roseville, California before I moved to Tennessee, an area much like Farragut. We had multiple of these complexes. They were highly desired properties. They sat right in the middle. They were not a typical apartment complex. And I am disappointed in the vote tonight because I do believe this actually had been 3 years ago. As the developer said, had this been 3 years ago, you would approve this because the medium density was changed. I was part of that steering committee when it first stood up. The problem was this commission and that steering committee never went back and looked at the vacant parcels and made a determination on to redesignate them or not. That was what was supposed to happen back in 2017 when I sat on that commission. When I started, I only lasted about 6 months because of the time of meeting. But the town has failed on that point. 3 years ago, this would have been approved because it would have met the requirements. That change has undergirded this, and I am disappointed. I appreciate Mr. Myers. I appreciate you taking a look at it and actually, thinking through that. And maybe the developer can go back and redesign and come up with something that will work. Thank you.
My suggestion would be there to get with the people that, we got a lot of people in the room here that's got opinions, and they could be helpful to the developer and his staff because they have ideals as well. So that would probably be a good start, I think, before it would come back to us.
Does anybody have any discussion on that? I know we already had a motion.
We got a motion in a second?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a motion, by Pavlin and second by Commissioner St. Clair to deny resolution PC-21-10. So if you are ready for a roll call.
Ready.
Commissioner Myers,
No.
Commissioner Russ,
Yes to deny.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Mayor Williams,
Mayor Williams, yes.
Chairman Holliday,
Yes.
Commissioner St. Clair,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pavlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Bellamy, Commissioner Preston,
Yes.
and that passes by a vote of 8-1. Okay. That'll be taken, I guess, to the Board of Mayor and Alderman, the zoning map amendment request, with the recommendation of denial.
On to item number 12, approval of utilities.
Not have any utilities, no. And I do not have any citizen forum.
That was my next question. No. No. None.
I would suggest Mr. Wilson get his facts together.
July 15th. I can't keep up with the days of the week, the day of the month, or the month. Yeah.
I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere with it, but I was part of those meetings. I was part of those meetings, and it was confusing.
What's your point? You're taking this factoid, that factoid, and they don't bring together whatsoever.
Well, they're so used to it.
Issue always either something with the eyes for a lack of motion, or maybe a motion to be deferred. That's not how we've done it. So we knew what they were doing. They saw what doing the opposite of zoning. I knew that.
That was their comfort factor in doing what they did to buy and develop.
It would have died at the initial motion.
Exactly. It would have died and never got to a vote because there wouldn't be a second.
And I think I could
Actually, that was,
just died then.
it just started honorably.
I think my wife sometimes thinks that we
I'm so glad it's being okay. I'm still working. Listen to myself.
The way of the motions and at the end. Like we used to. No, like when we have a, instead of doing the motion.
Say hello. No, I shouldn't say hello.
That's a question for Mark, because I've asked him that before, because I thought he would come back with an administrative request. That's why I.
Oh,
Well, I'm glad you brought up the forward too, because it was 2011. I appreciate
my wife has taken my son to Citadel for a college visit, and they're leaving at 6 a.m.
at all, we're basically,
They're leaving at something to be.
we do it as we see fit.
I'm making myself some to go out to eat and kind of do one of the things this weekend.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
Enjoy it.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, Noah.
Shannon, welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Thanks.
We've
Glad to
had
be
lots of
here.
lively discussions. I know,
Yeah.
that's her hard idea, it sounds like her first meeting.
That was
Hey, I'm,
Sometimes they show with pitchforks and,
look, I'm here for it, and I took all
So the good
these,
news is tonight, we don't need bodyguards going out to the parking lot.
no, I'm here for it, and I met with Mark.
Well, 10 o'clock, that's pretty good.
I had all my questions in my packet, and I met with him yesterday, so I could ask him,
Yeah.
now.
Commit somebody to
Yeah.
build out.
Our neighbor, I understand that from walking here.
I noticed that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm here to take
Noah likes to throw stuff. I started smiling. At one point, I just started smiling. I'm like, okay, we are so off topic here.
I'm trying to steer us back.
You are entertaining, but you're gonna have to come with a little bit more comic relief if you're gonna add that much extra time to the meetings. I need a few more jokes in there.
I appreciate all of that because I'm learning each time.
No, you're better off.
He's got such a man crush that he's ready to listen to it. It's brilliant.
I actually read her that. Hey, if you want to do a selfie, I'm good to go.
Where's he going with this?
No
Yeah,
egg.
exactly.
You too.
Hey, Ron, go ahead and give me that part of that pile. I'll help you sign. Is this mine?
All right.
Yes, I met with
Well, I had to.
I did get you more.
Yeah, it's really great fact that Vice Mayor Powell.
Thank you.
Oh, well.
I'm grateful. I was telling, Lane's,
I got some, it's part of the
putting my
problem.
mileage. Putting my mileage. They said, well, you ought to do that. I said, I know, but.
Well, they didn't check. I put mine down. I didn't.
Normally,
Because you're burning gas. You're not being
used to be able to
reversed.
run videos, and now
Kind of a,
I'm learning a lot more than
we
gas.
don't run out of video to take.
it's trying to be.
Brain cells and liver cells and.
There's restroom.
It's constantly evolving.
Yeah, and there's another one up right here on the back door.
Yeah, I don't like to go across the
If it goes much longer, I gotta go hunt down some snacks, a pack
That
of
sounds, I
crackers
was
or
like, are they
something
gonna
too.
pass around snacks? When do the snacks come out?
The guy that used to be,
Nice to meet you too. Have a plane to catch tomorrow, so I get out of here.
Gary this
While I'm here, I guess
All
I'll,
of you coming by.
well, I was gonna say too, with that reserve at Turkey Creek, I'm by there every day.
Right, thanks.
No, I didn't go to the meeting. I don't know.
She was just sitting out there complaining about stuff they had in her eye.
just a few weeks ago, and his picture was still on.
It's going from more, sometimes when you're on the board.
Yeah, you're not, they can't fix it.
Right, well, you can't put meeting minutes and stuff.
That's all you got.
Funny is Ray Keeney here.
That's all it is.
If anything comes up tomorrow, I'm gonna try to town.
Project.
Oh, I don't know if anything. They're